Good evening and welcome. Would you please rise for the presentation of the colors by Troops 398 and 336 of the local Boy Scouts.
Audience attention, color guard attention, color guard, forward march. Color guard. Halt. And salute. Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Color guard, post the colors. Color guard, and salute. 2. Color guard dismissed. Audience at ease.
All right, great job. Thank you, Troops 398 and 336. You did a great job, and we're honored to have you here for the presentation of our colors. All right, we've got a great show for you tonight. Oh, was that my outside voice? All right. All right. So, let's see here. We've got all kinds. Before we get started, earlier this week we had a tragedy in Las Vegas, and just absolutely one of the most horrific events that occurred in our nation's history. I think we should start the evening before we get on to our regular business with a 30-second moment of silence, if you'd join me. All right, thank you. It is it's sobering to understand that these events around our country keep happening, and it's surreal, and it just doesn't feel like it is real to see those news stories. I know that our police department actually authorized the wearing of armbands for its local law enforcement. We put obviously the flags are flying at half-staff around our city and around our state and around the country. And it's times like this where we need to all come together and think about what unites us. So thank you for that. Thank you for that moment. We do have quite a number of presentations today, and why don't we go ahead and start with the Sound Transit City Vision presentation. We've got E.J. Walsh, our Deputy Public Works Director, and also believe that Aday may be joining us. I'm not sure yet between the two of you to talk about As you all know, ST3 passed last fall, and we will be having a station come into our downtown. EJ, am I stealing your presentation here?
No, you're doing fine.
Okay. Well, we will be having by 2024, the train is coming to our city. The question is, what happens then? What does it look like? And what happens in the meanwhile? And what does that look like? There are quite a number of priorities that our city has to deal with and communicating with Sound Transit about what our expectations are as a community, what we want, what we desire. There have been ongoing meetings with the council and members of my staff in communication with Sound Transit, and I'd like to thank Aday and EJ for sitting down with the council, discerning what many of those hopes and questions and concerns are, and then how that plays into what the actual requirements under our city code and law. So as we move forward on this journey with Sound Transit, what we wanted to make sure, and actually I see Chelsea Levy in the back. Thank you, Chelsea, for being here on behalf of Sound Transit. I think it's very important that we lay out what our expectations are and that we operate on all from the same information. So what EJ is going to do is lay all this out about where we find ourselves, what the council and the mayor's office priorities are and how that overlays with the requirements and where we go from here and really what issues are at play. With that, EJ.
So good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of council, members of the public. So tonight we're here to discuss the city's vision for sound transit. And before we get into that, just to touch base to make sure we're all starting on the same page, I'd like to take one step back and just talk about the overall schedule of the project. So as the mayor mentioned, 2023 is the proposed start of service, which is the very bottom of that page. But this project, from Sound Transit's perspective, actually started way back in 2012. So from the overall time frame, we're about halfway through. So we're that bold 2017 line, where Sound Transit is working on the engineering and working on getting to the 35% design level to put out a request for bids for a design build agreement in 2018 and start construction in 2019. So with that said, what staff has done throughout multiple departments in both formal and informal settings is taken feedback from council members, city committees, be that FEDRAC, LUTC, or other committees, technical staff, so comments and concerns raised by the staff, as well as community comments that have been provided. Based on the city code, city comprehensive plan, established past practices, and acceptable engineering standards, all the comments we've heard, we've grouped into basically 3 categories. So those are code-based requirements, things that are an obligation of any developer that comes into the city, be that Sound Transit, a government agency, be that a private developer. The second is ongoing items. So these are items that we have a conceptual agreement with Sound Transit on that are not code-based requirements. And the third is open items. So these are items that are just that. They're open. They've all been brought up in discussion, but there's not a resolution at this point. So to start out, the code-based requirements that have come up, some of them have come up more than others. Some of them have come up on a limited basis, but are what you see on the screen in front of you. So they're conforming to the city code, which is kind of a catch-all, ensuring adequate lighting around the facility, both within the facility and the road network around the facility, providing for safe city camera infrastructure. That's also a code requirement that works hand in hand within our downtown area. Work to identify a safe train crossing of the BPA line, and that is governed by a lot more than just city jurisdiction, but that is incorporated within code. Provide ADA pathways, or handicap ramps is another term, to and around the station. Provide facade modulation in covered areas, adequate bicycle storage, retail space within the garage, and a livable downtown. The retail space within the garage is one of 2 that we are still working on with Sound Transit. It is a code requirement. That being said, Sound Transit's trying to balance FTA and federal grant funding requirements that do not go quite as hand in hand with that. So that is an ongoing conversation that will come back up as part of the development agreement in the future, in the beginning of 2018. As if that is applicable or if that is something the city is open to discussion on. The other one that is still a portion of discussion internally is the livable downtown. And that is a city prerogative to review codes and zoning and comprehensive plans prior to basically TOD starting, at some point after 2020. That one has less to do with Sound Transit, more to do with the city. So moving forward to ongoing items, I'm reading the first line at the same time. The development agreement I already mentioned. So this is not a code requirement. This is in both the best interest of the city and in Sound Transit. It kind of sets some expectations on both sides of the table. And this is something that conceptually everybody has identified that we're trying to target Q1 or Q1 of 2018 or next year to lock this in. And this will kind of tie into almost everything you see on this page, because all of these fall into that. They're not code requirements. We do have a commitment from Sound Transit to honor and to fulfill these requests of the city. And the development agreement is the mechanism in which they fall under. So safe city cameras, again, kind of a mutual benefit. This allows our police department, just as they can in select areas of the transit center today, to have cameras within the transit center. A combined police substation somewhere as part of the project. Reviewing security patrols with Sound Transit. So this is Sound Transit's patrols. This is not city patrols that as they do within the existing transit center and as they do in other stations. Pedestrian crossing at 320th and 21st. So that one right now is under engineering review to try and identify what alternatives are feasible and what alternatives make sense from a pedestrian safety perspective that'll actually be used. So citizen involvement related to the art. Sound Transit's presented to the Art Commission on multiple times. They've committed to continue to engage them and to engage local residents, if residents are interested, in the art selection process through a vetting process. And then staging property, which is, essentially the city has expressed to Sound Transit that the property that they're using to stage construction, we have an interest in seeing that surplused as quickly as possible and being returned to the tax rolls. So that staging property will, as the project evolves, will turn into the TOD parcels. So the open items, and these are items that, as I mentioned, we've talked about with Sound Transit, but we at this point do not have a commitment on, is the number of parking stalls within a second parking garage. So there's one parking garage already out there today that has about 1,120 spaces in it. As part of this project, they proposed a 400-stall parking garage. The city has requested that be increased to 1,100 to 1,200. However, we do not have an answer on that. Joint parking structure. So the city at one point had a conversation about enabling the city to go back and build future parking on top of a then completed parking garage. This is something that's not feasible. So this is, we'll continue to talk about how we can do a joint parking structure, but it's going to not be something that's done in the future. It would be something that's done sooner than later. And then utilizing new technologies to reduce power consumption. So this is a little bit broad, all-encompassing. It can include anything from solar to alternative energy. And the Sound Transit kind of told us that, they hear us, they hear this is a concern to the community, but they need some time to look at it. Their initial answer was their stations are all, as part of FTA grant money, they're all designed to LEED standards and certified as such. So by the nature of that, they automatically have they're automatically required to have some utilization of technology and power awareness and consumption awareness. But that one, that's an initial answer that it does get incorporated into the design. However, we are still waiting for additional information back on that. So those are the kind of key items that we've heard from everyone in this room. There's a couple others that haven't been talked about quite as much, but I do think for the benefit of council are worth talking about briefly tonight. So these are items that, based on the proposed usage of Sound Transit and based on bus routes and holistically the project, they've agreed to do. They're not strictly code requirements. They are gestures as related to the project. Now, that being said, they also are mutually beneficial. This benefits both Sound Transit and the city. But I will very much point out these are definitely wins for the city that Sound Transit has agreed to do this as well. So the first is South 317th Street from the 23rd Avenue South Roundabout to 28th Avenue South Roundabout is to reconstruct that roadway as a concrete roadway. That increases the capacity, the loading capacity of the road to allow for a heavier bus load and prevents future city maintenance of that, or reduces future maintenance. So the second, again, is to reconstruct another road, 22nd Avenue between 319th and 320th, again to a concrete roadway. So we're, again, beefing this up to accommodate buses, which has the added benefit of reducing city maintenance of the same road over the long time. So the third is related to traffic congestion. So the roundabout at South 317th Street and 23rd is currently an intersection. And what has been agreed is that Sound Transit, as part of their project, will construct a roundabout. And the goal of that is to increase traffic circulation. That's a bottleneck within our downtown. It's also one of the key accesses to get into the transit center. So, you know, we're removing that bottleneck and reducing queuing throughout that area. But again, that's another, you know, that helps the city holistically for the project and the downtown just in general at a high level. So the city's current tasks is, again, to continue to perform technical review and basically in preparation for working with council to put together the development agreement once we're at that point. Reviewing applicability of different city standards, and then ongoing discussion about the overall evolving project requirements. The city's future involvement is that development agreement. And then once that milestone is reached, to continue to provide input on the bidding process, which will happen after that, and then review drawings. So then once the bidding package actually is out and they have a design builder, then we actually get into the permitting process and ensuring conformance with specific codes. So the next city steps is just to continue that technical coordination and continue the discussions that we're having. And again, the developers agreement. So that's what I have.
Okay, thank you, EJ. Any questions, council? All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And again, Chelsea, thank you again for being here. All right, now moving on to State Auditor's Report. Ade Ariwoola, our Finance Director. Ade?
Good evening, Mayor, Council, citizen. I think the reason for this presentation is just to make sure there's no confusion about the report. There's not really much, just right off the bat, no financial impact on the city, but because of the way the report may come out from the State Auditor's Office, it is important for the council to understand what this is and for the citizens to know what exactly this is. But the bottom line is there's no financial impact on the city. It's just a routine thing that the State Auditor's Office must do for the federal funding. And I'll have, excuse me, Deputy Director, the person in charge of the construction, and the city attorney and the Section 108 to answer any of the questions later. This is not really financial issue. It's a process issue, and there's no financial dollar implication on the city. I just want to make sure that that is very clear off the bat. The goal of the presentation is to make sure that, you know, to let you know there's no financial impact on this, explain the technical part of the report and why we did what we did, show how we protected the asset of the federal way taxpayers and our corrective action to what the state is saying we did. The background on this, for 2016, we spent a little bit over $74 million. Out of that, 14.28 is in regard to Performing Arts Center, which is just about 19% of the total spending for 2016. Out of that, Section 108, which is just one of the funding sources that we use to fund the construction of Performing Arts Center, which we get that through HUD, is about $2.92 million. The same project was audited by the state in 2015 using the state guidelines, no issue.
Ade, can I interrupt you just for a moment?
Certainly.
What Ade is referring to is an Office of Washington State Auditor Pat McCarthy audit and review of the Performing Arts and Event Center that was just issued. When was that?
Yes, just got that. It was dated 29th.
Right. So it was dated on September 29th. And so it had some issues with regard to the acceptance of what we refer to as CDBG Section 108 monies and the processes for that. I want to make sure that we reference that. So please continue.
Yeah. So it is the process that they're saying the federal government has a different guidelines that we follow, and the state has a different process. So this is about process, not necessarily about how we report the financial spending. No, it is about process. What they are saying, if you look at your report, and I have highlighted some sections in your report for you on page 6, of your report. So they are just saying that we do not have a proof that we determine whether the contractor was debarred. When you're using federal money, which when we started the program, we were spending the state money, and it's the architect that was working on the project. The city decided to change from design build to doing our own construction, and that is the issue. The architect that was involved, after spending or one-third complete the design, which we've spent more than $1.5 million. So what the federal government is saying, we should have gone out to rebid that, which if we had done that, we would have lost $1.5 million. So I think it is a safe way. Yes, we will mend our ways, but I think the process actually saved the taxpayers' money. On page 4 of 85 of your report, they address financial statement and federal awards. And on financial statement, there's no finding. On federal award, there's no dollar implication on this as well. The statement that they made, again, I have highlighted some areas for you in your report. We issued an unmodified opinion. No finding regarding to financial statement. It's a clean audit. No deficiency, no instances of non-compliance that were material to the financial statement. So your financial report is as good as it can get. Federal award, that is where the issue is. And the issue, again, is not on the money, it's on the process that was used. And again, as I mentioned before, initially the architect that we were using when we were doing design build, who has done 1/3 of the work, about $1.5 million worth, that if we were going to follow the federal government guidelines, we should abandon that design and go out for bid, which that company may get it or may not get it. But that means we will have to start from the scratch. That will have delayed the project. That will have incurred additional cost. So there's no significant deficiency in the design or operation. Deficiencies that are considered material weakness are pretty much that we did not, again, re-award the contract to somebody else. On page 5 of 85, They say we reported findings that are required to be disclosed. Okay, for federal auditing, to a great extent, it's a checking. So when this auditor's office come in, they check to say, okay, federal government say, well, you must do this. Did you do that? Yes or no? You're supposed to do this? Did you do that? Yes or no? It's not about whether it is wrong or whether it should have been better if you had done it differently. It's whether you did it. So what the state auditor's office is reporting on is whether you've done this or didn't do this. It's a check mark. And again, as part of their report, again, which I have highlighted, the city qualified as a low-risk auditee under the uniform. Even with this finding, with this say, well, you should have followed this process instead of this process, we are considered a low-risk entity. Even for them, as part of auditing, as part of setting up any internal control, you're supposed to weigh the cost of putting that control in place against the benefit. You cannot spend $10 to guard $1. So going back to redo the bidding process for the architect and lose $1.5 million. Yes, the process is go back and rebid, which again will have resulted into a loss of 1.5, into delay of the project as well. As I mentioned, by the time of the decision, 1/3 of the architectural work is done. And that is what we will have lost. It will have delayed to bid. We will have delayed the project, increased the design cost. We will have lost about $1.54 million already incurred in the design cost. And that will have increased the total project cost and delay the time of the project. So as I mentioned, part of what is required in the federal audit is about checking off yes or no, yes or no, yes or no. So this is in response to whether they check, the state auditor's office checking, yes, we did not rebid this project. That is what this finding is all about. So we understand what they're saying. It is a federal requirement. It is not a state requirement. Yes, we disagree, and we've shared that with them. We have made changes to make sure this does not happen again. And again, there's no financial loss to the city. There's no penalty to the city. And again, I just want to make sure it is clear, before it is blown out of proportion. Otherwise, and also the city is now used to this. We haven't received finding, in so long. So it is a new thing, for us. And I think it's a way that the state auditor's office, is going after the federal grant, how that is reported. I'll be glad to answer any question.
All right, council, any questions? Councilmember Moore.
Thank you so much, Ade. On slide 11 and 12, you talk about how we've modified our process to prevent future occurrences. Mm-hmm. And on slide 11, you talk about how we've made changes to prevent future occurrences. Mm-hmm. What are those changes that you've made so that this doesn't happen again? Okay. And I should add that I have been really proud of how you run your department. And I know that for a very long period of time, the SAO has not had any findings. So this is just an opportunity for us to improve our processes, it sounds like.
Yes, it is. Part of the changes that we've made, especially, we will be including in our contract where the contractor will actually attest or certify to the city that they are now debarred. This debarment issue, actually, we did check. But remember, we had 4 people managing this contract over the period of the construction. What the state auditor's office was not able to find is the printout that showed that we checked. Even after the fact, it was checked. Of course, the company is not debarred. We just did not have the computer printout that showed that we checked. So we've incorporated, in our contract to make sure that as part of the contract, the contractor will certify to the city, in addition to us verifying, the contractor will certify to the city that they are not debarred, and that is one of the allowable options.
Thank you.
I just want to say that Ade and I have talked as chair of the finance committee, and we did discuss putting in some strong procedures to make sure this doesn't happen again. It was just a small thing, but it won't happen again because we're all aware of it. It doesn't do anything to our status in the community. It doesn't do anything to our bonding capacity. There's no negative financial impact on the city. It's unfortunate, though. It's not a clean audit.
Yes.
All right. Lots of lesson learned. Thank you. Council, any other questions? All right, thank you, Ade, for that thorough analysis. Okay, now moving on to Mayor's emerging issues and report. We've got, as promised at the last meeting, an update on the Camp Kilworth property. Brian Davis, our Community Development Director, will provide an update. Brian?
Okay, thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of the council. At the last meeting, there were concerns raised about the status of Camp Kilworth, and so I'm going to provide a brief update and history on that property and some of the suggestions that have been made for the property and how the city fits into those suggestions. First of all, for those who are unfamiliar with Camp Kilworth, it's located on the Sound. Here's Dash Point State Park, Dumas Bay Sanctuary, Dumas Bay Center, and Poverty Bay Park. It is just under 30 acres. The zoning is suburban estate residential, which is it's a residential zone with a 5-acre minimum lot size requirement. There is a deed restriction on the property. It was deeded to the Boy Scouts in 1934, and the restriction is that it has to be reserved for scouting purposes, so long as the Boy Scouts maintain an interest in the property. The camp had been successfully used for years, but beginning around 2005, the Boy Scouts began exploring other options for the property in terms of different uses, or reverting the property entirely back to the original owners, the Kilworths. And then just last year, the Boy Scouts officially closed the camp. And so currently, the Boy Scouts, and when I say Boy Scouts, it's the local administrative unit of the Boy Scouts, Pacific Harbors Council, located in Tacoma. It's an administrative division of the National Boy Scouts. They are currently working with the Kilworths on negotiating the property being reverted back to the Kilworths. What the status is at this point, we don't know. We've reached out to both the Scouts, again, specifically the Pacific Harbors Council and the attorney for the Kilworth Trusts. They both indicated limited details, as this is an ongoing negotiation between two parties, but merely to say that they are in negotiations of possibly having the property returned to the Kilworths. If that happens, it's possible that that deed restriction could go away, and in such a case, then the Kilworths would have the property with the underlying existing city zoning, which is, again, suburban estate residential. But again, how it plays out, we don't really know at this point, and as to the timing of when those negotiations would be completed, we're not privy to that information, as it is a private negotiation. At the last meeting, there was a suggestion. One among them was that the city should purchase the property. And so we have looked into what normally is the process for acquiring park property. I'll admit I'm an Eagle Scout, and so I have a lot of good memories of going to scout camp as a youth, some of my fondest memories. But we tried to have my staff look at this from a dispassionate point of view, and what the process would be if the city should become involved with this property. And so what we discovered is that there is language in the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space plan that the council has adopted most recently in 2013 that speaks to how the city acquires parks and open space property. It doesn't specifically have this property listed as one of the goals or future acquisitions, recommended acquisitions for the city, but it does provide this language. And it says, at times there's unexpected opportunities that occur to purchase land or develop a project that has not been identified in this plan or listed in the capital improvement plan. In those circumstances, the following criteria, and I'll get to those in a minute, the following criteria may be used to evaluate the property or project as an aid in decision making. Staff may assess the situation using these criteria, identify potential funding sources, and then present to the Parks and Recreation Commission and the City Council for consideration. So here's the criteria that it references, and there's 5. The first one is that that there's an identified gap or a need for the city to acquire the property. There's an urgent need or an opportunity that comes up. Could be geographic location or other unique circumstances that are not otherwise provided within the city's parks plan. There's number 2, there's a documented need based on evidence of unsanitary commissions or health concerns or code violations or what have you, in which it would be in the city's interest to remedy that situation and either acquire the property or help with redevelopment in some fashion. Number 3, that there be funding availability for a capital project that involves either an acquisition, again, or a redevelopment of an existing property, or to have that funding available to leverage other sources for park improvements. Number 4 is that if the decision to, in this case, what we're talking about now, if the decision to acquire the property if deferring that to some future point, if doing so would have a negative implication for either existing or future park and recreation operation or other capital projects. In other words, if we wait, then our future park system is going to have negative impacts if we wait. So that's one of the criteria. And then finally is kind of a general catch-all that we see in a lot of master plans is that it conforms to other master plan and other adopted plans. So we could go through all these and have a robust discussion all night. I just want to do one for the purposes of what typically is required for a park acquisition. I'm going to do number 1 just because we got some numbers on that. So again, it responds to an important gap in the park system or is identified as an urgent need. And it goes into more specifics of what need is. So community park standard is 2.8 acres per 1,000 in population. Community park, let me just briefly touch on what that term means. There's different levels of parks within the city. There's regional park, like Dumas Bay State Park, which is not unique to the city. It's for everyone. Community park is like Celebration Park, Holly Park, Dumas Bay, other things that are more community-centric. And that's what, if we're entertaining city involvement with this, in which there becomes a party for Camp Kilworth, the property would be considered a community park. And so this is the standard that we would use to determine what the need is for additional community park land. So based on 2017, current population was about 96,000 people in Federal Way. We need 270 community park acres, and the current inventory is 309. So we have quite a bit of excess of, again, if we're trying to quantify the term need, which could be, we could talk at length at what need exactly is, but if we're trying to quantify it, we do have adopted standards in the plan that the council's approved, and we're in excess by almost 40 acres of this particular class of park. So using that standard, Camp Kilworth would not meet this need criteria until 21 years from now. So there's some time in which that need would become triggered. So getting back to the 5 criteria, I've summarized those 5 into brief statements. The first of all is the need, which we've just covered. The second one is unsanitary conditions, code violation, visible deterioration. 3, there's got to be funding availability. Again, the plan identifies future projects, future parks, and identifies potential short and long-term funding options for those parks. Again, this one is not one of them. Fourth, that there's a detriment to operations if we somehow delay a decision on this. And then again, 5, it conforms to adopted plans. So just based on this criteria, it doesn't appear to immediately, and then the language, quote from the Parks Plan, is that in order for acquisition to be considered, the majority of these criteria need to be met. So at least 3 of these would need to be met if we were to take that one suggestion. I'm just focusing on that one suggestion. There's been another number of different concepts in which Camp Kilworth gets preserved. I'm just, for tonight's discussion, I'm just talking about the potential of the city's ownership involvement, and it would need to meet at least 3 of those criteria. Here's some examples of previous city purchased parks that are community parks, some of which were relatively easy, others that were quite, that took a longer time to realize. And that is a brief history. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Council, any questions on this? All right. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Good job. Very thorough. Thank you very much. One of the things, when we know, obviously we promised this, but as you noticed, that one of the things, if we know that there's going to be a number of comments on something, we want to make sure that people have the up-to-date information to make sure, when public comment is forthcoming, that we're all operating from the most recent information. So, thank you.
Yep.
All right, now Brian is going to talk about the IRG status update and applications and pre-applications. Again, this has to do with the IRG property, formerly known as the Weyerhaeuser property. This is obviously of great significance and importance to the community. We had some pre-applications come in, as well as some ongoing applications. I wanted to make sure that everybody knew exactly what was going on, and give an update status. And we've come quite a way since August of last year. But Brian, would you bring us up to date on where we're at and what's going on just recently?
Yes, thank you. So to bring everyone up to speed, this is the former Weyerhaeuser property. Now it's called IRG, which stands for Industrial Realty Group, which is the current ownership of the property. This, for reference, this is I-5, and this is Highway 18, Weyerhaeuser Way, going through here, and this is 336th. The first 3 landmarks on here that we've identified are existing today. So there's the headquarters building, which is the one that everyone knows about, that you can see from southbound I-5 or eastbound 18, is a conic building known for its architectural value and quality. Number 2 is the technology center up here, which is currently still being used as we speak. The headquarters building, by the way, is empty, and the owners are negotiating or looking for possible new tenants for that building. But the tech center is occupied to an extent and is currently being used for research, development, manufacturing by International Paper. And then down in this corner is the rhododendron and bonsai garden area, which is a renowned portion of the property that draws tourists to the area. And I have to say, if you haven't been there, I recommend going there. It's a gem to the city. So number 4 is 2 proposed warehouses. They're each just over 200,000 square feet of proposed warehouse space. Warehouse A, for those who have been around and recall the preferred freezer discussion, that's now being called Warehouse A. The city sent some comments back after they submitted the preferred freezer warehouse proposal, and they have since modified that proposal based on a number of factors, one of which was the city's feedback on the proposal. It's now called Warehouse A, or Green Line Warehouse A. There's also a second warehouse, Warehouse B. So Warehouse A is roughly in this proximity. Warehouse B is down here. So they're side by side, basically, and they right where this 4 is are the 2 warehouses, or at least they're proposed. And then number 5 is in north and around the tech center, and there's 3 warehouses of a combined square footage of over 1 million square feet that have been recently indicated to the city that they want to get feedback on a potential application. So nothing formal has been submitted on this northern proposal by the Tech Center for 3 warehouses, which they're calling the Green Line Business Park. But it is something that we now, that they asked for comments, and we're going to review for them. The whole property is over 400 acres. There's about just over 20 different parcels or different individual properties. But for purposes of this presentation, I'm just referring it to as a single property or single ownership. So just as review to the council and for those who've not been through this before, the warehouse A is subject to a use process 3, which is a land use review of a proposed development, and it goes through a series of criteria and reviews. There is a notice required, there is appeal provisions, and coupled with that is a SEPA review, which is a State Environmental Policy Act, which is a state requirement that local jurisdictions review as part of ensuring that environmental and other considerations are taken into account with development. Processes 1 and 2 are much more. They're either a letter to the applicant, which says your development's ready to go, or it could be a lengthier staff report. There's no notice with those. They're usually simpler projects, but this one rises to the level of a 3 or use process 3, which again does allow for notice and appeal and comment. So there's a key difference here that I want to briefly bring up, and that is a pre-application meeting, which I referred to before. But before there's an official application of a development proposal, for something this large that we're talking about, all these proposed buildings, the city does require a pre-application, which is just in this room over here as you walk by, where we meet with their development team, all of our review team, which includes city planners, city engineers, Lake Haven, South King Fire, building officials, and so forth, so that we can get everyone to the table. And it provides an opportunity to give feedback to the applicant about what they can expect if they were to submit a proposal. It doesn't vest the application, but it does provide a useful mechanism for applicants to get feedback before they go to the expense and time of drawing full plans, which can be an expense to their development. So what I referred to earlier. Let's see here. So the one up here, the 3 warehouses of over 1 million square feet, those are only in a pre-application phase. In other words, they've come to us and said, we're thinking about doing 3 warehouses. We want you to give us comment about what we might expect. The 2 warehouses at the south end, warehouses A and B, those are full applications. They've gone through the pre-application requirements. They've submitted applications, so those are in process. So just so we're clear on that distinction. Okay, so then there's a review of the submitted materials. And for this unique piece of property, the zoning is, and again, if you're familiar with this, just bear with me, but this is an update, so I want to just provide information for those who haven't been through this before. But just for visual reference, this is the city's land use code. So if you want to build something on your property, you have to, this is what governs that. If you own IRG property, then this would apply, at least the 94 version of this, the 1994 version of this would apply. And there's an additional zoning layer, which is called the concomitant agreement, or concomitant zoning agreement, or CZA, or another number of different proposals. So the property in question has a little bit more that it has to go through before it can be developed. And as I mentioned before, there is notice and there is a comment period. There's technical comments that the city sends to the applicants after they've submitted an application, with their drawings that shows here's where we're putting warehouse A. Then we write back and we say, okay, This location may not work with either one of these, so you may need to modify it. And if that's the case, then we give it back to them, and they resubmit it back to us. That was the case with the preferred freezer example. They submitted that back in, and I'll get to this in a minute, but just since we're talking about this, they submitted it in the summer, and then in the fall, we issued them a letter that said, and it had 70-some comments back to them about how their proposal needed to be modified, which they have, and that is now the form of what we now refer to as Warehouse A. So we're still in a comment, review, resubmittal phase with Warehouse A, as well as Warehouse B, which we just received. So again, there's two decisions that are issued. One again is the SEPA threshold determination. That's a state mandated decision that the local jurisdictions make in regards to whether it's met SEPA guidelines. That there's comments that can be submitted from the public, and it's also appealable. And then the use process itself, once that's issued, it can't be appealed. So that's the framework that we're using, using all of these, that we're reviewing all of these proposals. So I briefly mentioned Warehouse A, so we can kind of cruise through this a little bit. Again, I mentioned that they submitted it a year ago last summer. Various iterations were given back based on, again, the feedback that staff provided to them. It's just over 200,000 square feet. It's still under review. Again, it's quite a bit of back and forth between us and the applicant. As I mentioned, once the threshold, the SEPA determination is issued, there will be a comment period and can be appealed. There's no decision date set yet because it still is under review, and it largely depends on how responsive they are to our comments. So we can't predict how long they're going to take. They often express frustration at how long we take sometimes to get comments, so there is some back and forth on that. And then, as I mentioned, that both of those decisions, the state required determination and the local determination, both of those are appealable. So the previous aerial photo, if you want to shift it clockwise to 3 o'clock, that's the orientation of this photo. So this is Highway 18 heading east, and this is Weyerhaeuser Way going this way. This is the location, proposed location of Warehouse A, and then Warehouse B is and we kind of had to superimpose both because we don't have one site plan that shows both of them. So here's Warehouse B right next to it. So you can see Warehouse A is a little bit faded because, again, we tried to put the two together. So this Warehouse A is further along than Warehouse B in terms of its review, but they're both being reviewed as we speak. Warehouse B is, so it was submitted more recently. It's a little bit smaller, but pretty close. And we just recently issued a notice that the application was complete, and it's currently under review. And again, so the difference between B and A is B hasn't even had its first review or technical comment yet. A has had several comments and back and forth between the applicant and the city. So along with the different structural proposals, we do have some boundary line adjustments. The property owner, again, as I mentioned before, there's over 20 properties that are involved. And when they inquired it from Weyerhaeuser, Weyerhaeuser had developed the property with really no regard for the property lines because they owned it all. So now that the current owner wants to develop, and it seems to be the case that with these boundary line adjustments, they want to get isolated parcels that are more in line with where they want to develop rather than the property lines that are kind of all over right now. So they have submitted 2 boundary line adjustments. One is for the headquarters portion, which would be south of 336th, and then the other one is for the technology center north of 336. So there's two different boundary line adjustments. They're almost complete. I think we're actually waiting on the applicant for some surveying information, but the review has been done, and those are likely going to be done here pretty soon. So this is, again, sort of turn it clockwise. Oh, excuse me. I take that back. So we're going to go the other way this time. We're going to go counterclockwise with this one. Interstate 5 is on the bottom here. And here's Weyerhaeuser Way. Here's 336. You can just barely see off the screen here. This is the current technology center. And this is the, if you're familiar with where the DaVita building is, it's right here. And so this one, they're proposing a warehouse here, and then two more on the south end of the tech center. Again, this is in a pre-application phase, so they're just exploring what they might expect in a full application from the city. So the status of this one, again, they just submitted for a pre-application a few weeks ago. It's over 1 million square feet between the three of them. It's under review. The applicant has requested on their, when they submitted the pre-application conference, they requested that this be processed under, or that it be reviewed, the pre-application that is, under a use process 4. So we talked about 1, 2, and 3. 3 is where there's a decision issued and you can appeal it. It's a staff, it's an administrative decision that is given by the community development director. And then a process 4 is one in which it is done by a hearings examiner. So the city would issue its recommendation, and then the applicant, if they agree or disagree, or if the neighbors agree or disagree, they would come to the hearing and they would submit their comments to the hearing examiner, and then that impartial third-party reviewer, as the hearing examiner is, would then make a decision based on the criteria that are in these books. So it's a little different than the city issuing a decision and then they appeal it to the hearing examiner. Subtle difference there. So our meeting with the applicant is scheduled for October 19th for this business park proposal. Okay, and then separate from that, so period on that. This last one is an administrative decision that was submitted a few days ago. And this is for brush removal of the property, to basically clear out some of the underbrush of the property. And as I mentioned before, this added notebook right here has some requirements that are on top of what we normally would require for any other type of development. So there's some unique things that we need to look at for the property when they just want to clear underbrush. It's a little more involved with that. And so they have requested to do that. We can and have done that. We issued an administrative decision for, I mentioned the DaVita property just to the north. We did issue a similar underbrush removal decision for them to do that. And so they've requested to do the same. The zoning is a little different than the DaVita decision that we gave, and I haven't really gotten into that, but there's zones within this zone, which we won't get into tonight, but it is a little different from the DaVita, and so that's something that we've not issued yet, but very likely could issue here in the coming weeks or months. Just for clarification, they wouldn't be allowed to go in any wetland. Again, they would have to go through all the provisions in this concomitant zoning, which is very restrictive on environmental features. So as long as they're doing general clearing not in the environmentally sensitive areas, then that's likely what they will be able to do. The review timeframes, if you might have already gathered this in some of the dates that I've provided up here, but use process 3 can take 6 to 9 months, and SEPA can take 3 to 6 months. Again, the preferred warehouse A, it was submitted over a year ago, so it has taken some time. The boundary line adjustment can be a few months. Building permit could be a couple months as well. So there's several things that affect the timing of this. as I mentioned before, this added binder here has some additional provisions or restrictions depending on how you want to look at it. And in addition to that, the complexity of the project, it's a unique piece of property. There's a lot of buildings. It's a lot of square footage we're talking about. So can that be authorized under these codes that we're talking about? It also depends on how thorough the applicant is with their submitting of the material. For something that's complex, if they leave something out, then we write back and we say, we need some additional information. And that's, again, goes back to some of the back and forth that I mentioned before. There are public comments that need to be taken into consideration. This is a public process. It is a city process, and there are concerned residents about what's going on, so we need to take that into consideration. This isn't the only thing we do. We have a number of other developments that we review every day, as this is just one of them. And so it also depends on our level of availability and how busy we are, and that goes to staffing levels as well. So this is not in your handout. I inserted this at the last minute because this really captures what's going on here. This is page 1 of the concomitant agreement. It says the property is a unique site, both in terms of its development capacity and natural features. Weyerhaeuser, and this is again when Weyerhaeuser was the owner, so replace Weyerhaeuser with IRG because the zoning it goes with the owner. Weyerhaeuser, or in this case IRG, desires to develop its property with maximum flexibility, which will ensure optimal development while preserving the unique natural features of the site. And that's the complexity that we're dealing with. You talk to one person and they'll point out and they'll say, well, development capacity, develop, maximum flexibility, optimal development. And then you talk to someone else and then they say, natural features, preserve natural features. So that's the balance that we're trying to do with this property. And some examples are on the within the concomitant agreement. Some of the development provisions that are in the concomitant agreement is that they can, for every 20 acres, they're exempt from local wetlands requirements. They're not exempt from federal requirements for wetlands, but as far as the local wetlands requirements for every 20 acres, they're allowed up to 10,000 square feet of wetlands exemption. Again, that's in the concomitant agreement. On the other side, they're required to have a managed forest buffer. They're required to have a certified forester go out and look at a forested buffer along the streets to make sure that as people drive by that it still maintains its unique appearance to those who are driving by. And that takes up quite a bit of their property. And so there's some balance as we get into the details of the concomitant agreement that speaks to this quote right here. So that's a quick update on where we are and a little review of the process and what's required with it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilman Rhonda?
Thank you. The boundary line adjustment application, what will that do for the property? Why do you think they applied for that?
So what it does is it will isolate a lot of so for instance, this one right here, and I don't remember the exact configuration of the current property lines, but what it proposes to do is essentially isolate each of these buildings. And there may be some that are paired together, but it provides a more clear break in property for these developments to occur. A lot of times when they build across property lines, they're responsible for not only one property, but then 2 properties. And I can only speculate, but I think it's so that they can just isolate the building on one property and only be concerned with that one property as they try to build a building.
Councilmember Duclos?
They're still talking warehouses, right?
Yes.
So they'll be bringing big trucks, bring stuff to the
In all
warehouses.
likelihood, and it depends on the kind of warehouse as well.
So I'm assuming then that we're going to require some improvements to that road.
Yes, that's part of the review that we would do. Again, the concomitant does provide some allowances, but it also requires that we go through our process of traffic mitigation and analysis, which is something that we're doing for all the ones that I mentioned.
All right, council, any other questions? Councilmember Selsky.
Yes, thanks, Mayor Farrell, and thanks for the presentation, Brian. You know, understanding there's a lot of demands on your department. Everybody wants their project put on top of the priority list, I'm certain. So a couple quick questions. How many staff FTEs are involved in this particular project right here for the review and all the determinations?
In planning, there's three or 2.8. In building, there's 1, and in public works, there's probably at least 1 or 2.
Okay. Involved in this particular project right here?
Yeah.
Okay, and so we have folks doing other things as well.
Well, I mean, that's not the only thing they do. I mean, they're doing other things as well in addition to this review.
Okay, and so there are other projects, major projects going on as well
Yes.
that others are counting on getting through the system,
Yes.
just like IRG is.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess the obvious question is, what would be needed to speed up this particular process for IRG? You mentioned there's frustration on their part because of the time frame it takes us. So.
I guess I would answer it a couple of different ways. One is that they have the option of providing funding for a third-party assistance for review. They did do that during Preferred Freezer, but they didn't like how that turned out. So I don't suspect that I mean, I can't speak for them, but they haven't done it yet. The second answer that I would give is that with Preferred Freezer and Warehouse A, at least it has the appearance of coming in to an ending. The other ones may potentially go a little more, at least from the developer standpoint, a little more efficiently than the first one is, just because the first one we had to dive into the code that is 1994, which we don't look at every day. So from that standpoint, there's some institutional knowledge that has been gained from the first proposal that could be carried over from the other ones that we now review.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, council, any other questions? Councilmember Kopak.
You know, Brian, I'm just I'm looking at these drawings, and it looks like we've got maximum size buildings for each property here, which kind of leads me to, I mean, one of the questions I have is they've got to preserve the nature of the property and bringing things up. Bringing things right up to it looks like very close proximity to the roads, I think would certainly be detrimental to that goal. So that's one of the concerns I have, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that. The other thing is, I think the idea of bringing trucks onto Weyerhaeuser Way would be extremely detrimental to that area. I think it totally changed the nature of it. And are there, I mean, it's their property. We understand that. But as far as concurrency is concerned, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, that's the principle that basically any development has to be supported by the infrastructure around it, correct?
Yeah, there are some, as we jokingly say around the office, there are some coupons, so to speak, within the concomitant agreement that says, and Weyerhaeuser worked this into the agreement that says they're allowed a certain number of square footage of improvements before they're required to do frontage improvements of the road. They'll exceed that with what we're talking about, but there's some that potentially could have a minor exemption from. But yes, what you're saying is true, that they will have to mitigate it in some fashion.
All right. And as far as the improvements, if any of these projects were to go forward, the required improvements, those would be paid for by the landowner, correct? Whoever that ends up being. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, thank you.
All right, Councilmember Honda.
Thank you. So with the warehouses that they would like to build, do we know the traffic impact yet? The trucks, how many trucks they expect to be coming and going?
The exact number, I don't know if it's been determined at this point, but that's another one of those things that we're going back and forth on. that our traffic engineers are reviewing. And again, there's 3 different proposals that we're talking about. But yeah, it is something that, again, the codes is fairly clear on what needs to be done based on the number of trips that are being generated by a proposal. And we're making sure that it meets those adopted codes.
So speaking about the roads, the trucks would either go to Highway 18 or to 320th to get on I-5?
That is something that they have indicated, that if they're going to so for those accessing this property, what they've indicated, and it's not something that I don't know if we've blocked in yet, but what they've indicated, at least preliminarily, is that for any truck that's accessing either of these warehouses, even if they're coming southbound I-5, they'd have to get on Highway 18 and come this way. Likewise, if there's any trucks that are going to if these warehouses get built and there's trucks that need to access this site, then what they've indicated is, and it's kind of off the map here, but if they're let's say they're northbound on I-5 this time, rather than going 18 through all this property, they'd have to go northbound all the way to 320th and then down through Weyerhaeuser Way this way. They've indicated that. I don't know if that's locked in yet, but that's what they're proposing to do.
So how can 320th handle that kind of traffic? It's crowded, at this point, it's difficult to drive on 320th during certain parts of the day. And if we have quite a bit of truck traffic, which with 3 warehouses, I would think that's potentially hundreds of trucks.
Yeah.
How could we allow that to, it just doesn't seem to fit with how the city's going right now.
If they reach a point where they cannot mitigate their traffic impacts, then they can't move forward. But as long as they can mitigate it as required by code, then they would be able to build.
Following up, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Councilmember Duclos?
Well, just following up with what Councilmember Honda, but the wear and tear on our roads too. If they were to come through up to 320th and down, the traffic jams, plus with those heavy trucks, we'd have an awful lot of wear and tear on our streets.
Yeah, and that goes into the mitigation. That's a good point that you bring up as well. It's not just the capacity, but the actual, and I forget the traffic engineering term, but the wear and tear. I like that term.
I wasn't done. So with other pieces of property that people build on, they sometimes have to make road improvements. So would we get to the point where we would tell IRG that they need to improve 320th at some point?
That could be part of their mitigation. I don't know the full details of that yet, but like I said, this one just barely came in as a pre-application, which it's not, we haven't even reviewed it, and it's not a binding application, but certainly that's one of the possibilities that could come out.
Will the state be involved with that project 4? Because that would be going out to Highway 18, which is quite an issue getting around 18?
Yes, and they have been notified through us, and I think even through some neighborhood activism, I think they've been notified as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Kopang.
Yeah, Brian, I appreciate the fact that there's got to be a level of impartiality in your office and on you and your presentation. I certainly appreciate that. Are any of these projects a foregone conclusion, or will we say that every one of these projects still has substantial barriers to go through to possible completion?
I wouldn't say any of them are foregone conclusions.
Okay. Okay.
I think it should be clear that they have significant amount of hurdles to overcome.
Right.
But at the same time, it should be clear that if they do overcome those obstacles, then they're granted a building permit.
Yeah. I think your language has been very reasonable and fair, and I think that's exactly where you need to be. But I think it's important to emphasize that there's not an eventuality to this outcome. There are still substantial hurdles.
That's correct.
Okay, good. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Burbidge.
Thank you. Thank you for your very thorough presentation, Brian, and for the council discussion. Is anyone looking at the the potential regional impact of these warehouses as well? For example, on the gateway planning that's going on for 167 and 509?
And that's through WashDOT, as I understand. So, like I said, we have indicated, or we've notified WashDOT on both the proposals down south. We will notify them on these northern proposals as well, and how they then tie that into the Gateway project. We'd work with them on that to see if it would. But we asked for their comments since they are the experts and the stewards, so to speak, of the Gateway project.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Honda.
How do these potential warehouses affect North Lake and the viability of North Lake? Are there any wetlands that are going to be affected by these structures that would eventually affect North Lake?
Yeah. So they, the pre-application was just submitted. We haven't made that determination yet. However, my recollection of the wetlands report, which they have submitted, I don't know how they can avoid the wetlands with those 3 warehouses around the tech center. So there likely will be some impacts that, if doing so, they would either be allowed a limited amount of exemption through the concomitant, or once they're beyond that exemption, they would have to mitigate those wetlands either on site or elsewhere. So they can't just fill wetlands once they're beyond this exemption, not doing anything about it. They would have to take that into consideration. That's something that we would ensure that would happen as well.
Thank you.
All right, Council. Councilmember.
Yes, thanks, Mayor Farrell. I want to follow up to the Deputy Mayor's comment and looking more regional as well. You know what, just driving around, it seems that there are a lot of empty warehouses down in the Kent-Auburn Valley. We know that a good part of Fife, Sumner, Puyallup have been taken over by warehousing facilities as well. So are we privy to any kind of market studies that would show the need for new large warehouses like this, especially in this area here?
So that goes to our comprehensive plan and zoning layout as we currently have it, which does take into account need and supply. Like, for instance, the multifamily issue. Mm-hmm. We're currently looking at what is our current need versus what is our current supply. Right now, we've got planned for a number of units in the future, and there's concerns by the council, and we've heard that, so we have to identify our solutions to that. With the commercial side of things, that's also taken into consideration in terms of employment land. This one, again, because of this I thought this would be a good visual.
It is.
Yes, it has been tonight, because this is essentially a zoning contract with IRG and the city. Regardless of whatever needs change, unfortunately, we're bound by this, and we can't change it without a mutual agreement. And so if we do research and we go to IRG and we say we haven't identified a need for warehouses in Federal Way or South King County, we can't, even with that, we can't change this concomitant agreement without their mutual participation. I mean, we could, but there'd be some, if I were to go to your property and say I'm going to rezone it, Mr. Selsky, then you'd probably be upset, and that's kind of what we're facing.
Okay, great, thank you. And then just one other question. With the fish processing warehouse, initially there was a customer identified for that.
I'm sorry, there was a what?
A customer?
Oh, yes.
Identified specifically for that use, that building. Do we know of any customers that are interested in or have come up and said, we need a warehouse in Federal Way? Or
not to the city. We've heard secondhand from IRG that they have people knocking at their door, but we've not heard anything in the city that says, yeah, hey, we want to look at this IRG property.
Okay, so they have mentioned that there is a demand for this from the customer standpoint.
I've heard Mr. Messmer mention that there is a need for it, but again, as far as any documented follow-up, I've not done that.
That's not our part yet, I understand. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Let's go ahead and move on to the next item, which is update on code compliance concerns. There was a comment at the last meeting we said we were going to follow up on.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. As you mentioned at the last meeting, there was a concern raised during citizen comment about a violation that the city pursued, and there were concerns about how that was carried out. And just as background, this is the property that is in question. This is Milton Road and South 375th right here, so it's right on the southern border of the city limits. This is Milton down here. All these, this red one and these three blue ones are all under the same ownership of Mr. and Mrs. Ellingson is the property owner name. This right here is the pond or the wetland in question. Back in April of 2016, so last year, April, Mr. Ellingson requested an administrative decision for limited tree clearing on this parcel right here. And that was, again, that was an administrative decision, so it has a 16- file number, and this will come into play as I explain things. So part of the confusion last week is that the cease activity notice that we gave had a file number with a 16 prefix, which actually was this administrative decision. There was confusion on the part of the code officer who wrote the ticket, and that's why there was a comment made, it's 2017, why is there a file number with 16? Well, they went out there with this file, this 16 file, to ensure that this was not taking place on this red property, which in fact, and unfortunately, it was. And so when they wrote the ticket, they put this 16 number rather than a new violation 17 number. A mistake by the code officer, but it doesn't change the fact that the property owner got a cease activity notice on the property. So he cleared this portion, not all the trees, just a few of the trees on this property, did some limited clearing with approval from the city, began clearing some trees and filling the edge of the wetland right here without city approval. And that I think was some of the confusion that Ms. Vargo made a public information request about, and she identified this property saying, where's the tree clearing permit? There in fact was not, but there was for this one, and so that's part of the confusion that took place. With this decision of authorizing the tree clearing, it was limited. Again, the number of trees was limited, and also the location of the trees. It couldn't be by the wetland or any other protected area. Mr. Ellingson asked that this pond not be considered a wetland because, well, actually, I don't know why, but my speculation is that he intends to divide or develop the property without the wetland there. So he asked that the pond, again, be identified as something other than a wetland. We disagreed. We said, no, it's a wetland. So he got his own wetland consultant, and they said it's not a wetland. So then we had our wetland consultant that the city retains review the report that said it wasn't a wetland. Our consultant said, no, it's a wetland. So Mr. Ellingson required a third party, Department of Ecology, to come down and sort of arbitrate the matter, even though that's not what they do. It's just kind of a review a courtesy review that they do. Ecology came down and said, no, it's a wetland. So don't do anything there without talking to the city first. Okay, and that's the next slide that I just rehashed all that history. So I'll just leave it on the screen there for those viewing at home if they want to look back on that, and also if the council has a copy. So then Mr. Ellingson was asked to then provide, oh, this is what I talked about earlier. So yeah,
And what date
I'm sorry.
Okay, so let me go through this real quick. So in April of 2016, he asked about removing the trees, again, on the property that did not have the wetland. The city approved it in July with conditions. Mr. Ellingson's wetland consultant submitted evidence in June of 2016 that it was not a wetland, or should not be considered a wetland. The city's wetland consultant, Petite is what it's called, the firm is called Petite, they said no, and that was in August of 2016. And then the city said, okay, it's a wetland, don't do anything until you have delineated the wetland.
Excuse me, Ms. Vargo. Do not, please do not interrupt the speaker. Ms. Vargo, please do not interrupt the speaker. Brian?
Yeah, okay, so, so then in 2017, they said that's when they wanted Ecology to come down. So Ecology came down in March, met with the city staff, Petite, which is the wetlands consultant from the city, Mr. Ellingson and his wetland consultant, environmental design, and Department of Ecology met on site in March of 2017 to determine whether it was a wetland, or to kind of, to arbitrate the difference between the two wetland reports. So then a week later in April, Ecology said we agree with the city's consultant that it is a wetland. So this is April 2017. And then Mr. Ellingson received a memo from Ecology, which was then misinterpreted that rather than it's a wetland and you should stay out, it was misinterpreted to say you're okay to proceed and go in the wetland. So then the city received a complaint. We went out there, we posted a cease activity notice on the property. This is a copy of that notice. This is right here. Get the mouse to work. Here's the case number that was filled out incorrectly, the 16 case number, which again was that administrative decision authorized for the other property for tree removal. Again, they just took all the files of the property, went out to the site, and said, okay, there's a cease activity that needs to be done, and just a mistake on the part of the code officer put the file number from the old tree clearing approval. So this is July 14th of 2017. The cease activity notice has 2 date fields on it, and another honest mistake, they put the 16th down below, when in fact the 14th was a date, it was a Friday. 16th was a Sunday. Our code officers don't do wetlands cease activity notices on Sundays. So it was a 14th, so it was a mistake. And then there's a indication of who the staff person was, and that's the notice. So I think there were some concerns about the incorrect file number and the extra date field that was different from the correct one that was noted above. We do have every time we post one of these, our code officers fill out an affidavit of when they posted it, and we have record of that being July 17th. So I apologize for the confusion on behalf of my department that may have occurred as a result of that. So the violation itself, again, this was in July of this year. We issued the violation order. We talked to the property owners about, usually in these cases when there's a violation that has occurred, it's most efficient for us to work with the applicant on abating the nuisance, or in this case, restoring the property that was developed without authorization. And so we presented that to them in August, and it took some time, but eventually at the end of August, that voluntary compliance agreement was signed by the Ellingsons. And they had to provide a wetlands and restoration plan by September. which did not happen. And so we did grant an extension, writing a letter that they could submit it by October 6th, which happens to be this Friday. We have reached out to our wetlands consultant just to prepare. If we don't hear by Friday, then we need to start taking action, because we can't just keep giving additional extensions and dragging it on. If we do that, the expenses that incur as a result of the city taking action will be forwarded to the property owner.
Oh, please.
So here's some pictures of what of the violation. There's some tree cutting. There's some fill that's being brought in that's going into the wetland. Again, you can kind of see the wetland in here. Here's the wetland again. You can see the fill coming in the wetland, and the wetland, not just the wetland buffer, but the wetland itself. Here's some fill that's been brought in for the road that goes down. The dark portion goes down to the wetland. Here's some trees that have been cut in the wetland area again. Some fill in the wetland. Some piping that have been installed by the applicant intended to help with erosion. And these pictures are, I think they're about a month old, because the applicant our surface water team has been out there, and they've asked them to install additional erosion control measures, especially as the rain season starts. And they have installed some of those erosion control measures until we can then identify exactly where the wetland was, the type of wetland, the type of plant life that needs to be restored, how it needs to be done, because wetlands are very complex. It's not just get an excavator out there and dig it again and then all is well. So we're proceeding forward with this very carefully, because this is a feature that the city values. And that's it. So I'd be happy to answer any questions of the council.
Councilor Honda.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Brian, for your presentation. So when there's in order that a developer can take down trees, but only so many trees, and on weekends or holidays, they go in and take down more than what they can. If a citizen sees something like that happening, because it happened near my house a few years ago, when a whole group of trees were taken down, which were not supposed to be taken down, what can the citizen do? They call 911. It's not a police matter, so the police don't know how to handle it. What can be done to stop the activity until the city comes back to work on Monday? And I'm asked this pretty frequently from citizens, so I don't know what to tell them, because I don't know what the answer would be.
Sure. Well, whether it happens on a weekend or a weekday, if they're going to cut trees, the code officer going out there and putting up a notice, if they want to keep cutting trees, there's not a whole lot that the code officer can do unless they call the police. So if there's clear illegal activity, tree cutting, this is a good example of what would happen in that case, is that they're going to be required to do a lot more work than they otherwise would have had to have done had they come to the city first, because the requirements, I'll take this one away now, it doesn't apply anymore. The requirements for restoration are difficult. So it's not just like, well, let's just cut it on the weekend and get away with it, because there's no code officers working at it. Eventually, if they're coming in on Monday or Tuesday and they investigate the violation, then there is some very lengthy, expensive, and methodical restoration activities that are required to occur as a result.
So some of these tree stumps look pretty significant in size. How do you replace a tree that size? I mean, what is the implications for the?
And the code takes that into consideration, because you can't just cut like you said, a mature tree and then put a seedling in and hope to be okay. It's a lot more involved with that, and like I said, they are required to do more. In terms of a restoration plan, they're required to do more if they cut without authorization than they otherwise would have had to if they come to the city and say, I want to cut these trees, what's the criteria to do so? And which we'd review it, and we say, yes, you can cut these trees, but not these. If you do it, then there's a whole lot more work than you're going to have to do to restore the property, more than you would have had to have done than just cutting what we said was okay.
So for this property owner that we're discussing right now, the implications if the property isn't restored, what are the implications to the property owner?
I'm sorry,
If the property is not restored to what it was before
so
these
they're gonna,
violations occurred?
Yeah, they're required to submit a restoration plan that our wetland consultant reviews and approves the plan that lays out, here's steps A through Z of what you have to do. And then we follow the progress as they finish that restoration plan. If they don't, then we go to the next step of enforcement, which is, fines or court. We rarely have to do that. We usually are pretty good with working with property owners because they don't want to go to court and we don't want to go to court.
So if they're fined, then does the city go in and restore the property?
Yeah, so like I said, if they don't turn anything by this Friday, in terms of a wetlands report, we've already contacted our wetlands consultant to kind of, hey, get your schedule ready because we're going to need you potentially if we don't hear by Friday, where you go through, you delineate the wetland, you identify a restoration plan, and they have to pay for all that time that our consultant is working as a result of the activity. And then that plan is agreed upon, or in this case, it's a requirement of the city as part of the restoration plan, and they would have to restore it. Otherwise, then we go to the next level of enforcement.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Let's go ahead and then move on. There was a question in the back, and actually, instead of, one of the things we tried to do, and I think I thought it was Ms. Vargo before, so sorry, Suzanne. Sorry about that. Ma'am, would you actually please come up and did you have a question?
No, I'll fill it out. Thank you.
Okay, very good. All right. Okay, maybe during the public comment.
If I could comment after him, if we were going to go into general comment.
Ms. Vargo, you raised this issue, and because you raised this issue, please address, if you'd like to come up and address.
Well, hi, Suzanne Vargo, Frederick Way. Thank you, everybody. I know this is really complicated, and I did bring up the cease order last week. I'm going to kind of have to abandon my speech for tonight, and if I could respond to Mr. Davis, I would like to point out that Mr. Ellingson has not signed that restoration plan, and I have pictures right here of him working on Sunday and doing more work with his bulldozer. So as far as I'm concerned, that is a third violation. And when we looked at the cease order, it said in black letters, the violation of the cease order would constitute a fine or jail time. And now I'm looking at 2 more violations on top of that. I am just befuddled. I am just befuddled. I don't necessarily think we can trust Mr. Ellingson or his biologists at this point because he has done nothing that you said. During the city meetings of 2015, he said he had a permit from the Natural Resource Department. He did not. That was not an oops, I misunderstood. This gentleman has worked for a construction company for 32 years. He's lived on this land for 40 years. If he has his own biologist, I'm pretty sure he knows it's kind of an important thing. I'd also like to say the senior complex next door, their stormwater drainage management goes into this wetland. Okay, can I go back to my statement now, or can I be done and then?
You get another public comment. I wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity because you raised this issue.
I would love to share pictures afterwards of a moving bulldozer at the wetland.
Yeah, please provide that with Brian,
Okay,
to Brian.
thank
Thank
you.
you, Ms. Vargo, for bringing this to our attention. Okay, all right, thank you very much. All right, so community events, we have the 25th anniversary of the celebration of the Korean Quarterly event, 25 years. It was absolutely amazing. It was held at the Performing Arts and Event Center on 9/21. We had the Federal Way Farmers Market Chili Cook-Off on 9/23. As usual, I had way too much chili. It's just actually, anyway, it was great. It was amazing. Advancing Leadership Evening with the Stars is this Saturday at the Federal Way Community Center. That's always a great, and it's the Kiwanis. Actually, no, the Kiwanis is the Oktoberfest this Friday at 5:30 p.m. at the Federal Way Community Center. The next night is the Advancing Leadership Evening with the Stars, a great community event. All right, that's my report. We had a lot to cover. Now for the most important part of the evening, and thank you very much for your patience. Why don't I list off some of the folks that will be speaking. First, we have Lori DeVore, then Mary Ellis, and Tyler Wessling. Ms. DeVore, you're up. Thank you very much for your patience. Then Mary Ellis.
Mayor Farrell, Deputy Mayor Burbidge, and Council, thank you for this opportunity. I'm just here to, I want to speak on behalf of the Friends of Camp Kilworth. I live in the neighborhood, and if you've not toured this property, you've got to go see it. It is such a beautiful gem, and it's more important, it just becomes increasingly important to preserve these kinds of properties as our communities and our cities become more urban. It's heavily treed, it's naturalized, there's trails, there's beach, there's waterfront access, and then there's this beautiful, right in the middle of it, an amphitheater that opens up to that beautiful Puget Sound view. And so, it would be, I understand the complications of preserving a property like this, but I would ask that you keep your mind open to what the possibilities might be for this property. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, Mary Ellis.
Hello again. Well, thank you so much. Tonight, I've talked a lot about Camp Kilworth since 2005, and I know that you're all aware of the property and its historic significance as well as its environmental uniqueness. But I really, really appreciate the fact that you've been so responsive. I know that there's a lot of other pressing issues, and it really came to the forefront when I was here 2 weeks ago because of the irresponsibility of Pacific Harbors Council. They absolutely abdicated their responsibility for this property by pulling out the ranger. We'd had issues in the neighborhood, and he kept that at bay. And now we're faced with a historic lodge where the wiring has been removed. Here sits an old log lodge built from 1936 that will not withstand a winter without some kind of heat in it. And the response we get is absolutely non-existent. We've asked about insurance issues. We have asked that citizens are willing to help police it, but no, they posted it for private property, which it is, but those kind of postings only work for people that are honest, and the rest of them are in there creating havoc, not just for the camp, which is so important to all of us, but also for the surrounding neighborhood. And I live in the Crestview neighborhood, and they've always been good neighbors because they've always had a ranger on the property. And it was absolutely irresponsible of them before this deal was finished, both on our part and for the foundations, to leave that property unprotected. So I cannot thank all of you enough. You have continually listened. You've come out and looked at the property. Even your staff has been out there, and your different committees that have taken the time to look at it. So we do appreciate everything you've done. And I don't know how to hold their feet to the fire, but the Pacific Harbors Council has been absolutely irresponsible. There's no other word I can use for that. What they've done with the property, to the foundation, and to the neighborhood that's always been welcoming to them. So if there's any recourse at all, we would appreciate it. We are not getting answers, and hopefully somebody's going to have to be responsible insurance-wise to keep that old building preserved. So that's where we are tonight. So thank you very much. I appreciate your efforts.
Thank you, Mary. I appreciate it. Great comments. Thank you. Hold on just for a second. First, I want to say thank you to all the council members. There have been a lot of conversations, and Mr. Tabram's going to speak a little bit later. Myself and another council member met with Mr. Tabram. We've had staff. I want to thank Brian Davis for his outreach, and Ryan call for reaching out because of the ambiguous status of this property right now, just really trying to pin this down. You know, in this community, the city's only 27 years old in regard to its actual incorporation history, but this community's been around a long time. We lost one of the oldest buildings, probably the oldest structure in this city, because elements were allowed. It was down there in the, Marwan, was that the Larson property, that old house? And elements had been allowed to get into that house to where mold set and tear down was really the only option we had left. So what I'm going to direct, and as soon as, I think you're absolutely right, especially as we enter into these fall, the fall and the wetter months now. What I'll do is I'll direct Marwan and legal counsel and Brian to reach out to the scouts who have physical possession of the property now to take emergency actions to protect the 1936 Boy Scout Lodge.
And I will say too, the fire hoses were taken out.
I know.
The fire marshal did not get a polite answer about that. And it comes from Pacific Harbor. The scouts you're looking at have been terribly responsive. They have done all they can do, but even they're being told they can't do anything.
I know. So we're going to reach out to them first thing tomorrow and get permission to go onto the property and see what it's going to take to take steps to preserve this, or ask them to take those steps. Because what happened to that Larson property should not be allowed to. This lodge, this 1936 lodge, cannot be allowed to get to deteriorated state. We'll see if we can get permission to get on this property and take emergency action. If we need to expend some city funds, we'll do so. What happens to it eventually, we're going to have to figure out, and we cannot guarantee based on the amount of money and ongoing costs. And I want to hear the rest of we all want to hear the rest of the comments, but what we've got to do right now is act as a community to take steps to preserve this property, and we're going to do that.
Well, thank you very much, and I'll continue to volunteer in any way I can.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mary. All right. Taila Westling. And then David Song, or Long, David Long. Taila?
Hi, I didn't time these, I'm sorry, I hope I don't go long, I'll try to go a little fast. My name is Twyla Westling. I'm a founding member of Advocates for a Cleaner Tacoma. I'm a resident of Northeast Tacoma for 10 years, but more importantly, I'm a Anishinabekwe. I'm an Ojibwe woman. As a Anishinabekwe, I have a responsibility to water my relative, who in my language is referred to as Nibe. I have a responsibility to protect and defend, to sing and pray over, and to listen and to honor. So I want to thank you tonight for allowing me these few minutes to talk to you about the threats of LNG to the Salish Sea and my relatives, both human and more than human relatives. Every day I drive home from work on Dash Point Road, and it takes me longer to get home, but I get the opportunity to be near my relatives, the trees and the water. The LNG plant will have a detrimental effect on all of us, including the Salish Sea, from the increased tanker traffic to the increased emissions of fracked gas being transported, as well as the emissions from flaring. There are 3 things that I would like for you to know tonight. Number 1, my relatives, the Nisqually, have predicted that the salmon will be gone in 4 years. This last year, they made the very rough decision to shut down their fisheries, and that was a very, very tough decision for them to do. We are losing orcas. And I want you to go home tonight and I want you to Google salmon deterrent maps and Kinder Morgan. Because up in British Columbia, Kinder Morgan has been laying down salmon deterrent maps to prevent salmon from spawning in the stream so that they can move forward with their pipeline. So also, the second thing I want you to know is that the emissions from the industries on the Port of Tacoma are not measured in real life, and nor are they calculated cumulatively. Puget Sound Clean Air Agency only measures for particulate matter 2.5 in real time with 1 monitor on the port. Industry reports out to PSCAA, and their emissions are measured by mathematic calculations. They're not measured in real life. Also, PSCAA does not measure the emissions of industry in relation to each other. So each industry is measured singularly based on what they report out to the agency, and nobody is measuring it together. Third, agency and industry have gone out of their way to sell LNG as an acceptable alternative to bunker fuel. They don't want us to think of LNG as fracked gas, but that's where it comes from. It will come in on barges, oil trains, and tanker trucks, and in fact, it's coming in now on tanker trucks up I-5. Agency and industry don't want you to know that TOTE will not be required to burn the LNG if they determine that it's not the most economically fuel option available to them. All this means more chemicals in the air and in the water. Our relative, the water, is already suffering because of industrial degradation, including a toxic plume on the Hylabos waterway. Please join us in trying to protect the Salish Sea. Thank you. Miigwech.
My name is David Long, a member of Lakota Middle School and the Pacific Harbors Council, and first class scout of Troop 398. I'm here I hope that the City Council can vote on buying the property, Camp Kilworth, for youth purposes, because nowadays in our bustling internet world, kids are trying to not go outside more. And I think a camp would be a great way to get them outside, because as there's less and less areas for parks because of our, like the ING plant and other places, if we do go with that, it will mean less area for parks. So I think we should make it into, give it back to the youth of the Federal Way and the middle schools for different purposes for the middle schools, and maybe also have Boy Scout camps as a nonprofit. So, okay.
Thank you, David. Great job. Dana Holloway, and then Lori Sechrist, and then Nanette Reitz. After Nanette, it'll be Jerry Graham and Kian Craig.
Good evening. I have several things tonight, depending how fast I talk, how many I'll get to. The first one is, I'd like to start with a statement. The IRG applications and pre-applications for massive warehouses do not adhere to the corporate park zoning, nor does it meet the 1994 Warehouser Conglomerate Agreement. This property is not zoned for industrial. The other item is for the crosswalk at South 320th Street and Pack Highway. A lot of us have been there lately. I've noticed or observed that many of the pedestrians cannot get across in the amount of seconds allowed for them to cross. I think the timer is set for 23 seconds, and I've counted multiple people. I was doing like 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. In some cases, we need 6 to 12 more seconds. Otherwise, people are still in the crosswalk because they can't get across fast enough. So I'd like to request the traffic people to look at that because it's dangerous to the pedestrians. And the other one is a question. For the Sound Transit Rail Station, is it going to have public restrooms?
It's a great question, Dana.
I'm a senior. I like public restrooms. Thank you.
Thank you. Great job, Dana. Couple things, Lori, before we get started. Dana, Marwan and I've asked him to, he got from my, we've nodded at each other. He's going to get back to me, and he'll have Rick Perez, our senior traffic engineer, take a look at the times. You ask a very interesting question. Well, you'd think it'd just be a surety that there would be restrooms. There have been actually stated concerns about, it's too bad that Chelsea left with Sound Transit. Some of these stations do not have their bathrooms open, or they do not have them available. Some folks have run into some, we all need them. And sometimes people need access to them more than others, and putting that diplomatically. But and so that's something that is definitely, we want to make sure is included in our list. Obviously, sometimes in public restrooms of this nature, you've got to make sure they're not vandalized. You've got to make sure that they're well kept and that kind of thing. But we actually did hear from somebody who does ride Sound Transit, and that's been an ongoing concern. So that's on our list of concerns that we're addressing. A great question, Dana. All right, Lori.
Okay, so I had to revise a little bit. And I could give you 5 more names, I might go over. But, so Lori Seacrest, president of the Save Warehouser organization.
You've got
so
5, Lori.
Mayor Farrell, council members, city staff, and neighbors. I stand before you again tonight to share our grave concern over the future potential development of the former Weyerhaeuser campus. So thank you, Brian, for that informative status update. And I want to make a real clear note that it's not just our neighborhood. It is not just the North Lake neighborhood. It is our entire region that this area affects. But what wasn't discussed was the impacts that these projects have on our traffic in our region. So in case you guys didn't do the math, I have. So Warehouse A and B and the business park, which is for the 3 new buildings surrounding the current tech center, combined represents 1,510,000 square feet of warehouse space. So I repeat, 1,510,000 square feet. So to put this into some perspective, Quest Field is actually 1.5 million. I was surprised to find that out. If anybody has been through the Kent area, the Kent Fulfillment, Amazon Fulfillment Center sits on about 70 acres, and it's 1 million square feet. If you've ever gone down that to see that Kent Fulfillment Center, it is huge. But a little closer to home, the average square foot of a Costco, we all know Costco, is roughly about 200,000 square feet. So I ask you, could our city truly absorb the impacts of 8 more Costcos and all the cars and the associated deliveries to it? So based on the traffic impact analysis, which we have all read, everybody in our group, the analysis that has been submitted with these applications and the assumptions that are going to happen with the tech center area, which apparently represents the worst case scenarios. Again, the 510,000 square feet of warehouse space will represent in excess of 2,900 passenger cars and 1,200 semi-trucks per day, clogging our already beyond capacity freeways and surface streets. So there are many more numbers we can ponder over, such as the total acres, the wetlands, the natural habitats that will all be destroyed, but I'm going to leave these topics for another City Council public comment period. So for now, I want you all to consider the impacts of the traffic, specifically the semi-truck volume that these projects will have to the area. And each and every one of you on City Council and Mayor have expressed their concern over this topic. In fact, it's acknowledged that moving traffic efficiently through our city is a fundamental infrastructure problem that must be corrected. And if people can't get into our city from the freeways, regardless of the new 324th on and off ramps, moving through the surface streets more efficiently really won't even matter. So all of you have told me personally that you do not want this gem of a region destroyed and turned into an area filled with warehouses. If the city truly wants to have an impact on the road infrastructure and to minimize what 1,510,000 square feet of warehouse space with 1,200 semi-trucks per day could do to this region, you must not be short-sighted and allow these projects to move through the system as currently proposed. We all know that the scale and the scope of these warehouses are better suited for areas already established as an industrial area such as Fife or Sumner, and not in our city of Federal Way. We must find a more suitable use for this property, and the time is now before these applications are permitted, before it is too late. The legacy of this property is in your hands. And per that 1994 concomitant agreement, the city must ensure that the land is developed in a manner that protects the unique natural features of the property, preserves the open spaces, and maintains the character of the campus. We can all become the environmental stewards of this land, just as Weyerhaeuser had intended for the many generations that follow. Thank you.
Well said, Lori. Nanette Reitz. And after Nanette, it's Jerry Graham. And then Kian Craig and James Weber.
I have some handouts.
Oh, please. Yeah, Deanie will start passing them down.
Good evening. My name is Nanette Reitz, and I'm a mother and a grandmother. I've lived in Browns Point for 26 years. I'm also a 26-year owner. My husband and I have owned the UPS store in Twin Lakes for 27 years, actually. And I was here. This is actually, I think, my third or fourth time here. My friend and chemical engineer, Steve Storms, and I were here on May 2nd, and we presented to you about the LNG in Tacoma. PSE's LNG, their 8 million gallon storage tank they're trying to build there. And actually, I believe it was Deanie that requested a study session for this. And we met with your city attorney and was granted a opportunity to present a presentation. That presentation we spent 3 weeks on preparing for you. We were going to do a presentation up against PSC to give you the facts. That was canceled on May 25th. The reply from you was, while the project of the LNG facility entails some risk, on balance, our staff professionals have carefully reviewed the evidence and do not believe the project is likely to have a significant effect on Federal Way. I beg you to reconsider. I'm here to ask you for another study session. I believe that your very words, Mayor, were, we need to be up to date on the information. You yourself stated that when you were presenting projects tonight. You don't have the latest information. We've just launched a petition on Saturday from the Puyallup Tribe of Indian Water Warriors and Redefine Tacoma, which was formerly known as the grassroots group Redline Tacoma. We've already got 1,500 signatures on it. This is a petition. I urge all of you to go online and read it. It is at redefinetacoma.org. Please sign it and share it. It's going to go to Jay Inslee. It will go to Attorney General Bob Ferguson, and all the agencies that are in violation of the work permits that PSE is on forward, going on, continuing their work. They were served a violation, notice of violation permit in April. They were actually issued it on the 4/12. And it's been 6 months. They're still in violation. They do not have the notice of construction permit, which is required for them to go forward with many of the things that they're doing. I presented each of the council members with a petition for them to read. I also presented them with the pictures of how much foundational work has been done without the required permits. This will affect all of you. It will affect your air quality. You're at risk because of any material breach was not studied in the environmental impact study. You will also be on the hook as ratepayers for 43% of the build on this. That's $143 million of the $310 million cost before any overruns. It's already overrun from $275 million, which was the original cost, to $310, and they've barely begun construction. So I urge you, how can we trust a company, Puget Sound Energy, that is here to make a profit off of this? If they're already working illegally without the proper permits, how can we expect them to operate it safely? I urge you as leaders and environmental stewards to please help us. Please do your due diligence. Please look at the latest research that we were going to provide for you on June 6th. That meeting was canceled. I don't believe you have the adequate information to make the decision to not look into this. And I thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll take a look at this and we'll reach back out. Thank you, Nanette. Jerry Graham, and then Kean Craig.
Good evening, Mayor and Deputy Mayor, council members, and citizens. I'm here once again to, well, first and foremost, because of the presentation tonight, I got thinking, let's see, was it about 8 years ago, I believe that we voted on some an extension of the light rail, and taxes have been collected for the last 8 years thereabouts. I'm wondering what happened to that money, because now we've got a $50 billion program, and I'm wondering, 50 billion? What about my money that I already spent? Where is it? What's it done for us? So I don't know what the answer is. I'd sure like to know what the answer is. Outside of that, as I've always said, Weyerhaeuser's property, IRG's property now, it's a corporate park, a wonderful corporate park. I would like to know if there's been any looking into that by the city, maybe with IRG, about developing that more to a corporate park within a warehouse. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. It's been that. It was being built when I moved out here 40-some years ago. So I thank you for the update from Brian tonight, and I was pleased to see that he had the concomitant agreement with him. That's of course something very important. So again, I would urge you, if there's any way to work together with IRG, to please find a way to develop that as a corporate offices only, not warehouses. And I also do not want to have my money out of my pocket for taxes paying for the upgrades for the roads and the maintenance on those roads over years for those big trucks running up and down my neighborhood roads. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Marwan, will you please have, I'll put Mr. Graham's pink sheet aside, and we've got, obviously, Ms. Holloway. We're going to get back to her on that issue, but would you have Rick Perez get back in regard to the, or somebody from your staff get back to her, or get back to Mr. Graham about distribution of ST2 funds to this sub-area and where those funds went, what they were used for. Sound Transit has what they refer to as sub-area equity and sub-area subdivision, and the funds received from one particular area stay in that area, and that's why one of the reasons why Sound Transit, the stated reason they gave for retraction of the stated plan on ST2 to have a station at 272nd and at 272nd, and why they pulled back up to 240th, where Highline College is. But ST3 does have 2 stations in Federal Way. So we'll get that information for you, Jerry. Great question. Okay, Key and Craig. And then after that, James Weber.
Hello, I'm Kean Craig. I'm a Boy Scout with Troop 398. I'm a first-class scout. And I know if City Council bought Camp Kilworth, it would mean a lot to a lot of Boy Scouts, because I know hundreds of people that have spent their summers as Cub Scouts at Camp Kilworth. Like, I don't know how many times I've been to the Fire Bowl at flag ceremonies, doing skits, at retiring flags, and that's the place where I first learned to properly use a pocket knife, axe. First place I shot a BB gun, where I learned to shoot bow. First place I climbed a rock wall, and I remember hours of hikes, just hiking around the property, learning about plants and learning basic scouting skills and learning about the Native American tribes and how they survived off of the land. And it would just mean so much to us and the community if you helped save Camp Kilworth. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. James Weber. Or is it Weber or Weber? Weber. Weber, yes, sir.
Hi, I'm James Weber, also a first class scout with Troop 398. Thank you for letting me talk about this today. So Camp Kilworth to me personally is more than just a historical place. It's a place that I built memories from, because all my Cub Scout years, I spent a good week there just learning so many different things. And thousands of people before that have done the same exact thing, and now we are starting to lose that and let that slip. And I personally would not let that happen, because this is just an amazing place, and it so much to so many people. So, yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Good job. Is it Mickey Blah or Ninety Blah? I'm having a hard time reading it. Mikey, all right. Oh, that's right, we met earlier. You're destined for medical school, I see. Come on up, please.
Okay,
And what
I guess you all know my name already, so.
All right, Mikey,
so
you're on.
I'd like to thank the Federal Audit Council and from Mayor Farewell and Mr. Moore over here, because he came down last Tuesday, and I'd just like to say we all want to save Camp Kilworth pretty much, not just because of us, but because of the upcoming generations, because then they won't get the same experience as us. I'm first class, Troop 98. Camp Kilworth really helped my skills up to Boy Scouts, which made me want to get better and better up to the point I am now. And if I wouldn't have gone to Camp Kilworth, I would have been probably not in Boy Scouts right now. It's a really good experience, really fun, brings you a minor version of Boy Scouts. And then the Fire Bowl, you learn so much stuff. It kind of brings you out of your shell as a child, because you do skits, you make new friends, you get memorized, you learn not to play near stinging nettles, and you get a great view, and you learn some skills, like let's say you played near the stinging nettles, and that's where sword ferns have these little things rub on. That's just an example. Let's just say you had the favorite swing set as a kid at the park. You were there every day with your mom. Let's say it got took down. How would you really feel about that for the next kids coming up? And I'd like to thank you. I'll let that sink in. And have a nice day. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mikey. Well done, well done. Oh, we've got State Representative Mike Pelliciotti in the back. Mike, thanks for being here. Representative Pelliciotti. Oh, and Christina Reeves. Representative Reeves is here as well. Thank you. All right. That's very nice to have our legislative delegation join us. All right, Leanne Schock, and then Gretchen Paletta, and Brian Tabram, and then Lynn Long. Then we'll read the letter at the last. All right, Leanne first.
Well, hi there. My name is Leanne Schock, and I am an Eagle Scout mom with Boy Scout Troop 692 out of Tacoma. And I am also a committee chairman for Cub Scout Pack 692, also out of Tacoma. And more importantly, I'm a board member with Camp Curran Community Association. And Camp Curran was one of the 5 camps slated to be closed by Pacific Harbors. And I'm listening to those scouts, and it gets my emotions going, because we don't do this or take this lightly. We sat across the meeting with Pacific Harbors, and we were absolutely promised we would fail. And I sit here tonight as friends of Kilworth, and I understand the value and the worth, because it is. It's about our generations moving forward and what we can share with the outdoors, with the education, our youth, the community, and otherwise. What I would like to say is this. We formed our own nonprofit, our own 501c3. We are Camp Curran Community Association. We started that with visiting our community, gathering supporters and board members, families. We have over 45 scouts in our troop, and we had a unanimous decision from the families to support our camp, to save our camp. And what I say in those 3 little letters of "our" is it has turned into 1 year successfully. It has been ours. We just celebrated our 1 year 2 weeks ago. And yes. And not only have we managed to keep that camp almost 100% booked between our units as well as outside scouting units from all over. We have units from outside of our council looking at renting our camp. And then beyond scouting, of course, we have Girl Scouts also. They ran a day camp there with 250 Girl Scouts through the summer. We also have area wolf camps, which is study of plants and animals and everything else not associated to scouting whatsoever, that have rented weeks upon weeks from us. We also have our very own Pacific Harbors Council, who have come back and found that their numbers in their day camps had declined because they weren't being run out of our camps. And they are seeking to be able to rent from us. So I encourage the supporters of the Friends of Camp Kilworth to understand that things are possible. And some of my past history, council members, is I was through California Council previous to this a few years back, and my troop, we were housed in a scout house in a city park. And we were also asked to leave through our council because the council deemed that units could not have these properties. And our city of Indio accepted us, supported us, and allowed us to lease it back from them. And that existed for over 50 years and continues to go on. Our scouts provide service. Our scouting families are the strongest families you will ever find in your community. And these young men go out to do amazing things in life. And through the camp, outdoor education is where it starts. So I thank you for that. I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I hope, do I have a few more seconds? I'm not sure what the beeper means.
Well.
Anyhow, it's just paramount, I guess, to understand that the scouts are there, and yes, they get to learn the skills and they get to do that, but what they bring back into the community, and then beyond that, your community itself provides back. So I just thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. All right. Gretchen Paletta.
Well, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Gretchen Jane Jorgensen Paletta. I am the second granddaughter of Ruth Jane Kilworth Jorgensen, who was Will Kilworth's niece. So I guess that makes Will Kilworth my great-great-uncle. At this moment, I have no involvement whatsoever with either the William Kilworth Foundation or the Florence B. Kilworth Foundation. I would like to. I've reached out to Bob Casey with minimal success. So if anyone can put me in touch with the stakeholders in the foundation, I would appreciate it a lot because I would love to be involved if I can. Purely mostly from a family standpoint, but also because I'd like to obviously help with this situation. Although Uncle Will passed away before I was born, my grandmother and her brother Wesley Kilworth had been very close to Uncle Will during their lifetime. Wesley worked for Will at Tacoma Handle Company and Vancouver Plywood. Having no children of his own, Uncle Will was an important father figure to them both, and his influence was present in their lives and the values they passed on to me. William Kilworth was a self-made millionaire who was incredibly civic-minded, giving significant amounts of his time and money to help develop the community he loved in a positive way. His gift of land for Camp Kilworth was meant for people to have open space to experience nature. And as you can see, his desire was so great for him that he had the foresight to create the deed to state that it would go back to his foundation if the Boy Scouts of America wanted to use it for something other than public use or scouting activities. I believe his hope was that his foundation would have the strength and ability to continue to carry out his vision of that land for public use if the Boy Scouts of America no longer could. I am endlessly grateful and truly blessed to see the passion and support you all have for my great-great-uncle Will's vision, and I hope the land at Camp Kilworth can continue to be used for all the public to enjoy, as was his intent. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Tabram, and then Lynn.
Good evening, Mayor Farrell and City Council members. I'm Brian Tabram, and I'm speaking once again in order to save Camp Kilworth. However, I'm not speaking tonight on behalf of Scouting, as we have plenty of Scouts here in uniform tonight who've done an amazing job speaking on their behalf. Tonight, I'm speaking as a veteran of the United States Armed Forces. For those who have not seen the video of the Rotary Lodge dedication from 1936, I highly recommend going online and watching it. This fascinating video shows William Kilworth, along with local area Boy Scouts from that era, using Camp Kilworth for its intended purpose of teaching scoutcraft, patriotism, courage, self-reliance, and kindred virtue. Without question, many of the young scouts shown in this video were American patriots who left home a few short years later to fight in World War II in order to protect and defend our nation's freedoms and our way of life. I'm sure some in this video even made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. For 82 years, Camp Kilworth, through its various programs and multiple organizations that it served, has been instrumental in teaching scoutcraft, patriotism, courage, self-reliance, and kindred virtue to the youth of our community. These are timeless skills and principles that are just as relevant today as they were in 1934 when William Kilworth deeded this property. Places like Camp Kilworth that have a focus and purpose of teaching patriotism are extremely rare in today's society. If our youth are to become patriots, they must understand and embrace the principles of liberty, equality, and justice of which this nation was founded. In addition, they must develop the qualities of character that mark true citizens: courage, responsibility, gratitude to the fallen, and a self-sacrificing devotion to the common good. Camp Kilworth fulfilled this unique educational need within our community until it was closed in March of 2016. The patriotism I learned as a scout at Camp Kilworth during the 1980s played a significant role in my desire and decision to serve in the U.S. Air Force. The scout skills I learned while camping at Camp Kilworth were invaluable as I deployed to Saudi Arabia and lived in a tent in one of the most desolate parts of the world where temperatures reached 130 degrees. Two recent examples of Camp Kilworth's patriotic influence on Federal Way residents is with Josh and Abby Prizer. Josh is currently serving in the Air Force Station in Florida, and Abby is serving in the Marine Corps Station in Japan. In addition to military service, there are hundreds of other examples of Camp Kilworth's patriotic influence on Federal Way residents who have made sacrifices to give back to our city, state, and country for the common good. I stand before the City Council tonight and respectfully ask for you to purchase Camp Kilworth to keep William Kilworth's legacy alive, for a camp to teach scoutcraft, patriotism, courage, self-reliance, and kindred virtue to the youth in our community. Purchasing this camp would also be a tribute to our World War II veterans who returned and built this great community we now call the City of Federal Way. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Lynn Long.
Good evening, Mayor Farrell, Deputy Mayor Burbidge, and the City Council members. Isn't our motto the City of Opportunity? As you can see, I have brought some of my friends, family, and community members tonight. 82 years. 82 years. This is the first time in 82 years that Camp Kilworth is available. If you are a realtor, you would be salivating at this fact. Big money to be made by compromising the earth. It is time to take a stand. Since 2005, I have been fighting to save Camp Kilworth. Back then, I was a Girl Scout leader in the Lakota Service District. In July of 2005, I was one of the troop leaders for their pirate camp. It was a huge success. The camp was packed. That same year, the Pacific Harbor Council and their Scout executive leader, Doug Dillow, tried to broker a deal to sell the camp to a real estate broker. I believe it was Norris Homes. As you know, the Scouts and community fought back. It went all the way to the state Supreme Court, where it was deemed the Pacific Harbor Council could not sell the property due to deed restrictions. Round one won, but not for long. In December 2015, Pacific Harbor Council sent out a letter to all members that 4 out of 5 camps would be closing. You can imagine the shock and dismay. During a meeting at the Crichton Center for Boy Scouts, Ralph Volker laid out his plan for the closures. On the closure list was Camp Delazine, Camp Jojobas, Camp Curran, and Camp Kilworth. Since Pacific Harbor Council could not profit from the sale at Camp Kilworth, Ralph proposed logging for profit in his slide presentation. Ralph estimated that about $35,000 in profits could be made from the cut to help fund their only remaining camp, Camp Thunderbird. Luckily, Linda Mapes of the Seattle Times ran a front page news story in March of 2016, which was instrumental in saving the camp from logging. Please support the Seattle Times by buying your subscription. Round 2 over, but not won. Can I have a little more time?
A little.
Okay. I have one more page afterwards. Let me read a few of my favorite quotes. Where there is a will, there is a way. Never say never. If you don't succeed, try again. One of my favorite movies is the movie called Bells of St. Mary, where the seemingly impossible can happen. I love these quotes and this movie because I am optimistic. $1. $1. $1 is all you need. You ask, what can you buy with $1? Not much. Ask Northeast Tacoma Historical Society and North Point Preschool. The $1 they purchased the historical Dash Point School from Marine View Presbyterian Church. How do they finance their operational expenses? Good question. Grants, fundraisers, silent live auctions, and private donations, and the list goes on. Each year, both of these nonprofits manage to run their 50c3 without being in the hole. Both have money for capital improvements. Ask Brad Stenrud from Dash Point Troop 398. Both his children went to the preschool, as well as my son David. Brad helps the North Point Preschool discern which capital improvements projects will be done each year and anticipates further needs that need longer to save up for. The real ask. So my ask is this. The City of Federal Way, in conjunction with Friends of Camp Kilworth, buy Camp Kilworth for $1 or 50 cents apiece. In return, a percentage of all donations made to Camp Kilworth goes back to help fund scholarships to be used by the foundation. Now, you know the lottery, right? If you take the slower payout, you get a bigger gain, but it takes longer, right? So think about that. High school seniors can apply for these scholarships to go to colleges like University of Puget Sound or UPS. Now, what I'm asking of you in the audience, Scouters and concerned citizens alike, you must continue to write letters, to be present at city council meetings, and talk to those who run our city of Federal Way, because if you have a will, you have a way. When a donor has a legacy, we must preserve it for generations to come. I think George Weyerhaeuser and William Kilworth would agree. Yours in service, Lynn Long, Friends of Camp Kilworth.
Thank you, Lynn. Stephen Storms, and then Suzanne Vargo for an encore performance. And then Betty Taylor.
Stephen? All right.
My name is Stephen Storms. I know that my speech is going to be too long, so I'll just sort of chop it up in pieces. I live in northeast Tacoma. I worked for Weyerhaeuser for 30 years before I retired. I'm a retired project director in competitive analysis. I have a degree in chemical engineering and was a licensed professional engineer. Most of the 40 years was spent working in the energy and environmental field. My purpose here tonight is to alert you to the threat that the Puget Sound Energy's liquefied natural gas plant will pose to you, both safety and economical. But before I get started, your city council meetings are very good, interesting. I noticed that there's a theme that runs through here, and Camp Kilworth, the Weyerhaeuser, and the LNG plant are all projects that are looking to find the best use of a piece of land. Land is something they don't make any more of, so you have to get it right to begin with. I worked at Weyerhaeuser for 30 years, and I know that knew George Weyerhaeuser Jr. And George Weyerhaeuser Sr. I was with him when I sang Happy Birthday on his 90th birthday just earlier this year. He's very, very proud of the Weyerhaeuser campus and had a head groundskeeper and spent many millions of dollars keeping it beautiful and serene. The question is, how do you maximize this beautiful, serene, park-like setting? And I'm reminded, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that's ever thought of it, but Jimmy Buffett had a song. It was, they paved parking lot to put in, and they paved paradise to put in a parking lot. And that's much the way I feel about converting the Weyerhaeuser beautiful campus into a warehouse, even though they sound the same. Camp Kilworth is the same thing. You can't lose it or else it'll be gone forever. I did visit you a couple months ago to discuss the reason I thought that LNG was unwise. I want to bring you up to date a little bit. LNG is basically same thing as natural gas that you use in your stove, in your oven, in your hot water tank, except it's condensed 600 times by cooling it to 260 degrees below zero. If it warms up again, it expands 600 times, and this 8 million gallon tank will fill like 30 Tacoma domes full of natural gas. And there's lots and lots of safety reasons, vapor clouds and things that will incinerate you, temperatures that are above cremation temperatures for human bodies. But economically is where you're going to see the most impact, because you are separated by a distance where we model it said only 3.5 miles. To other people have modeled 10 to 15 miles, so you can be in the vapor cloud. But economically, you're going to suffer from the plant that is designed for failure. They're spending more money than what they can possibly ever recover. The project costs have gone up more than what the return was projected. They cannot ever make any money. The cost of LNG has fallen since they started from $15 per 1,000 cubic feet to $5. So the price is going to fall by 2/3, which is going to be $1 million or $2 a year, $1 or $2 a day loss. So only people that can make up for that is the customers, and all of us are customers either in gas or electricity from Puget Sound Energy. We should never allow them to do it because we're going to be on the hook for it. The government might step in to save it, but if they do, that just means higher taxes for all of us. So please don't let that happen. I wish I'd had more time, but you now know a little bit of what I know, and the problem is that I can't unknow it, so hopefully you can't either. Please help support us. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Any questions? Well said. Suzanne Vargo.
Hello again. Letter of the law. When I think of this statement, I'm a bit dumbfounded. We were told the letter of the law would be applied to the process for the Weyerhaeuser campus and the concomitant agreement. But for the last year, the intelligent citizens have repeatedly questioned these zoning issues and why the city is creatively trying to get around this concomitant agreement. No industrial was ever a part of the Weyerhaeuser campus. Original posts on the conditions and considerations report from 2015 never showed an industrial area for this campus. Yet magically, there's one on the website now. Big industrial. How did this get there? The concomitant agreement does describe a corporate park zone. And here are a statement. Here's the statement. The property shall be subject to its own unique standards of review processes as set forth in the agreement. If the provisions of the CP, corporate park, zone conflict with other provisions of the city codes, the CP zone provisions shall prevail. Any changes in the city codes referenced in this agreement shall not be deemed to modify the provision of this code. The proposed concomitant will have a beneficial effect on the community and users of the development, which would not normally be achieved by traditional applications of the city zoning districts, and will not be detrimental to existing or potential surrounding land. This means you can't put whatever you want wherever you want it. I question why RG purchased this land if they were not interested in preserving or protecting the property which they knew was rare and unique. Questions arise as to why the city is not working to hold up the provisions of this concomitant and doing everything in their power to preserve and protect our unique campus. If I were to spend $70 million on a piece of property, I would make darn sure that I was going to be able to utilize it in the way I wanted to. This simple sentence says it all. The concomitant agreement runs with the land in perpetuity and prevails over any conflict with the Federal Way revised code. Site preparations, I'm going to let that go. One other thing I'd like to talk about is our rezoning, and the city's job is to uphold the law. When a citizen reports wrongdoings, they expect the city to do its job and look into the citizens' needs. I understand that safety is a big issue for our city. The protection should not come with just officers carrying guns, but protecting the citizens in all avenues. Because the city is allowing violation after violation, many of us citizens no longer feel safe. I do not feel it is my job to have to run after the city to see that they do their job and put myself in harm's way time and time again when these violations have been reported. I would like to ask the city, please, for an impartial contract and land use attorney to look into the concomitant agreement. If I could respond to you, the Highway 18 overpass is graded at 40% or less, very poor. The grading is at 25%. Remember our fish warehouse? That will bring everything, running semi-trucks all night long, nightlight pollution, all the chemicals that we talked about and we thought that were gone. They all seem to be back. And that'll do it. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Betty Taylor. Betty?
Good evening, Mayor Jim Farrell, City Council members, citizens. I would like to do an update on the lake project. As you all know, December 6th of 2016, I came before the City Council with the ideal, with a vision to create lakes made out of tubing and soap and lotion and the whole works. And because of the ideal, the citizens did respond. They responded so great. This could not have happened without the citizens of Federal Way and with donors. We have our biggest donor to date is my good friend Lori Seacrest. She's the biggest donor that we've had. We appreciate Lori Seacrest. We honor Lori Seacrest. We appreciate everybody. Behind-the-scenes person, who I really, really appreciate, Jerry Lynn Clark. Jerry Lynn Clark is my right arm. Administratively, she has taught me. I've learned so much from her. City Council members, I have learned a lot from you. Thank you for pouring your knowledge into me. Thank you, citizens, for pouring everything you have into me. I want to talk about the latest project that we've done. We know about the disasters that are in Texas, Florida, and there's other disasters. Me and Jerry Lynn, we went out to lunch, and it was over lunch. We were talking about the major disasters. Jerry Lynn brought up an issue, why don't we send lays to Texas? So we put our heads together. One of our, we were trying to figure out how do we get the lays to Texas, and we knew that it was going to cost a lot of money. So then we did do a drive at Lake Grove Elementary with all the students, and we made at least over 100 lays due to donations coming in. A lot of volunteers came. Susan Honda came, and she helped. Who else? Vicki, I can't pronounce her last name, but we know who Vicki is. She came. Ann Bevins came. A lot of citizens came. And through that, we decided to send the lays to Houston. Getting them to Houston, how were we going to do that? It was going to cost a lot of money. Funding that we didn't have, the lays were really heavy. So through a contact of mine, Jim Browse, he has a nonprofit through Help Northwest. Jim offered to send the lays to Houston through World Vision. So basically, and so when I talked to Jim, Jim said, okay, because of the floods, we know that the hurricane not just hit Texas, but went to Florida. So we sent the lays from Houston to Florida and the surrounding areas. So that's the latest update on the lay project. And because of everybody's involvement and because it's a 1-year anniversary, we want to do something for you. We want to do something for you. We want to celebrate you because you have celebrated us. So anyway, we are trying to work on planning a 1-year event, hopefully the end of November or December, but we're working on getting a planning team together, people that will come together and help us plan this event. We wanted to honor the citizens. We want to honor you because this would not have happened had it not been for such a great heart. And we appreciate this. We're going to get a definite date. But and I don't like to do this by myself. I was telling Jerry Lynn I'm up here by myself, but I don't like to do this by myself. But it's because of you, and we honor you, and we wanted to give our thanks, our appreciation for what has transpired. We're also working on a business plan. I'm taking classes now in that direction. So we're working to put a business plan together and get everything so that we can have everything legal, everything documented, whatever you want to know about the organization, which we're working in that too. Whatever you want to know, let us know.
Thank you.
We have everything.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Moore.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. Betty, the only thing I have to say is just thank you for continuously showing your passion and your heart to this community. So for that, I just wanted to say thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, and I don't have any more pink sheets, but we do have, I think, Paul McDaniel written letter. So please proceed.
Letter received from Paul McDaniel, and it reads, Dear Mayor Farrell, I would like to first start by thanking the City Council and Mr. Ariwoola for their timely response. After reviewing the email and attached report with my financial advisor, I have some additional questions concerning the amount of money the city will be investing in the PAC. The PAC project report that was attached to the email listed few sources and expenditures that I'd appreciate a little more information on. Number 1, city funds. Is this $11.5 million a loan to the PAC? Number 2, CDBG Section 108. What were the terms to receive the $3 million? 3, interfund bonding. Is this the funding source used to receive the new market tax credits? Number 4, proceeds from the sale of the land. What piece of the target property was sold and whom was it sold to? Number 5, FF&E. What does this acronym mean? The definition is not listed anywhere. If we were to add the city fund and interfund sources together, it would be over $18.8 million. So would it be safe to say that the city has made a capital investment in the PAC of around $18,849,175 to date? As for the chamber question, I find your answer, the city is honoring the letter of the agreement, and Chambers is within the time requirement as well, to be opaque. For this reason, I'm requesting a copy of the contract in question or a link to where I can review the contract with my team. This leads me to the first of two new questions. The target property was purchased by the city in November 2014 for $8.2 million, while the Northwest Multiple Listing Services shows the list price on 11/14/2014 to be $8.5, making the $8.2 million a $300,000 savings. Northwest Multiple Listing Services also shows the property was listed with a sales price of $6 million on 6/3/2014. I would like to know the reason why the price changed so dramatically in that short time frame. I would also like to know if the outstanding property taxes were ever paid. Our last question of the day will be about the Federal Community Center. How many years in the last 10 years of operations has the community center broken even or made a profit? Please include the capital budget and not just the operational budget when doing your calculations. I would like a written response to my above request sent to the email listed below. Sincerely, Paul R. McDaniel.
All right, thank you. Ade, would you please handle those questions and respond back to Mr. McDaniel? All right, thank you very much. All right, now moving on to the consent agenda. These items have gone through committee and can be passed all in one motion. I will, after reading each one of the items, ask whether a council member would want to pull an item for a separate and individual consideration. So, 5A, the minutes for the September 19th, 2017 regular meeting. Item B, printer maintenance contact award. Item C, Performing Arts and Event Center, PAC 2017-18, season passport printing and mail services. Item D, Performing Arts and Event Center, or PAC, art installation contract ratification. Item E, monthly financial report, July 2017. Item F, monthly financial report, August 2017. Item G, vouchers, July 2017. Item H, vouchers, August 2017. Council, is there a particular item that you would want pulled for separate consideration? All right, hearing none. Deputy Mayor Burbridge, do you have a motion?
I do. I move approval of items A through H on the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, so there's been a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? All right, matters passed unanimously. Council business, what's referred to as the Brito settlement. First, we'll have a staff report from Ryan Call, our city attorney. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council members. This is the matter that we discussed in executive session. I'm not going to go into any more great detail. The policy question before the council tonight is, should the city council authorize staff to resolve the Rudy and Stacy Brito claim for damages in the amount of $30,000? We have spent a lot of time evaluating this claim and working towards a settlement. I do believe this is the best way to resolve this matter for the city.
All right.
If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Very good. Council, are there any questions? All right. Hearing none, Deputy Mayor Burbridge, do you have a motion?
I do. Thank you. I move to authorize staff to settle the Brito claim for $30,000. Second.
Been a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Matter passes unanimously. All right. Thank you very much, Ryan. All right. Item B, interagency agreement amendment and funding approvals with Washington State Department of Enterprise Services and interfund loan authorization for the LED streetlight conversion project. First, we'll have a staff report from Desiree Winkler, our Deputy Public Works Director.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of the council. I am pleased to present moving forward with the proposed LED streetlight replacement project. With the policy question is, should City Council approve the amendments and funding approvals for the interagency agreement with Washington State Department of Enterprise Services and authorize staff to utilize an interfund loan up to $2.5 million for the LED streetlight conversion project. So some background, within the 2017-2018 adopted budget, there is a line item for capital project for LED streetlight conversion as an unfunded need. In January 17, 2017, Council authorized staff to apply for a Department of Commerce Energy Savings Grant and also enter into an interagency agreement with Department of Enterprise Services to complete an investment grade audit and an energy service proposal for this project. On July 18, 2017, Council accepted the Department of Commerce Energy Savings Grant in the amount of $350,000. In order to execute that grant agreement with the Department of Commerce, We need to identify where the remaining project funds are going to come from, and also show that we are intending to proceed with the project, which would be the amendment to the Department of Enterprise Services agreement for the project. So why are LED streetlights so popular? They use a lot less energy than traditional lights that we have, a minimum of 55 to 60% energy reduction. Other agencies have reported up to 70% energy reduction. They also provide superior illumination. The fancy word for high color rendering index is really that the lights that you see out there that we've put on our newer arterial projects are truly cleaner and brighter. It makes it easier to see. They require less maintenance than high pressure sodium. You don't have bulbs to replace that generally need replacement every 2 to 3 years. There's no ballast, starters, those type of things. The estimated useful life of these lights is 100,000 hours, which could be 15 to 20 years. They're also easily controlled. There's some options that we're looking at to potentially implement some dimming strategies, which would actually result in additional energy savings. So streetlight LED conversion has been done by several agencies listed here, and there's more that are implementing it as well. Some design considerations that we are looking at is that although the lights are cleaner and brighter, there are some concerns that there are adverse impacts for this bright light, such as sleep interruption and light pollution. We are looking at options of implementing what would be called a warmer color temperature LED, especially on neighborhood roadways, so it's not as bright and not as intrusive. Also, we're looking at streetlight controls, which at a minimum are going to provide superior operation and maintenance ability, where basically each light can report on its condition, whether it's on or off, at the right time of day. And also the streetlight controls also provide those dimming options, as I talked about earlier. So there's basically 2 different sets of streetlights that we need to replace. We have about 2,300 city-owned streetlights that we propose and have pursued converting through what's called the Energy Savings Performance Contracting. And this is supported by state law, and Washington State Department of Enterprise Services has a program which supports public agencies to complete energy savings projects such as this.
May I interrupt you just for a moment? We're approaching the 10 o'clock hour. Deputy Mayor Burbridge, can I have a motion, please?
Yes, thank you. I move to extend the time for the council meeting past 10 p.m. this evening.
All right. There's been a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. We are good to go, but not much more.
Okay, so back to where we're at. Energy Savings Performance Contracting is basically a way to identify how to construct and finance energy utility conservation projects. And the concept being is that the energy savings will pay for the project capital costs. And also part of this is that the consultant, when they develop the energy service proposal, they guarantee the maximum construction costs and then the minimum energy savings achieved. The energy service performance contracting is done by energy service companies or ESCOs. DES maintains a roster of qualified consultants, and public agencies may utilize these consultants in order to do the project. The city hired Amoresco through DES through this interagency agreement, and that's what tonight's council action is, to approve the amendment so that we can move forward with design and construction on this project. DES also provides project management throughout the project as we move through development, construction, and post-construction verification. The other set of streetlights that will need to be replaced are those that are actually owned and maintained by Puget Sound Energy, and we lease them through a tariff called Schedule 53. We will come back at a future date with an agreement with PSE to convert those lights. So the replacement costs are for the two different projects as described. The city-owned street lights would be a little over $2 million. The estimate for the PSE lights is about $720,000. A budget for controls is proposed for $300,000 with a contingency of a little over $198,000 for a total project cost of $3.25 million. The funding is the Department of Commerce grant that we did get notification that we received and accepted at $350,000. There are utility incentives or rebates that are estimated that would be given back to us after we implement the project of $400,000. It is proposed that the remaining city funds come initially from an interfund loan of $2.5 million, with this interfund loan being able to be bought out by bonds in the future if that is how council would like to proceed. The loan or the bond is paid back via the annual energy and maintenance savings, which I'll describe on the next slide. So the two sets of lights, one being the city-owned lights, would save about, with the conversion to LED, we would save about $210,000 a year on both energy and maintenance savings. The Puget Sound Energy lights are estimated that we would save $119,000 a year, with the total savings being a little over $329,000 per year. And we believe this to be very conservative. This is the minimum. We believe that we have options to even save more. So looking really at simple payback, if we do an interfund loan or bonding for $2.5 million, and we have annual savings for energy and operation maintenance of $329,000, that's about an 8-year payback. And there are agencies that are reporting less than that because they're able to save on initial construction costs and as well as get more savings back. So the options before council are to approve the interagency agreement amendment and funding approvals with Washington State Department of Enterprise Services to complete the design and construction of the city-owned LED streetlight conversion project in the amount not to exceed $2,031,541 and authorize staff to utilize an interfund loan up to $2.5 million for all phases of the LED streetlight conversion project. And option 2, do not approve the interagency agreement amendment and funding approvals with Washington State Department of Enterprise Services for the conversion of city-owned streetlights, nor approve an interfund loan and provide direction to staff. The mayor has recommended approval of option 1, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Council, are there any questions? Deputy Mayor Burbridge.
Thank you. I don't actually have a question, but I just want to say I'm very pleased that the city has the opportunity to move ahead with this conversion to LED lighting, and also to mention that during the time I served on the State Transportation Improvement Board, the staff for that board were asked to do a demonstration project where LED lighting would be installed in a city and then evaluated over time, and indeed the project showed a significant payback, as you've mentioned in your presentation, and I believe we would have full confidence in moving ahead with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, thank you. Councilmember Honda.
Thank you very much. I'm always happy to see our staff find grant money for city projects, and Public Works and the Police Department do a really awesome job of finding grant money. And converting to LED lights is something that cities across the region are doing. You gave us a list of all the cities that are doing that, and I've been monitoring that over the last couple of years. But I'm concerned about this project. We're voting to once again borrow money from ourselves with an interfund loan. And then in the 3 years, we'll have to go out for a bond. And I understand that, according to staff, the bond will be paid back with energy savings. And but that's assuming that we get the energy savings to pay back the bond. What I would like to propose tonight, well, at FedRAC, we were given the updated budget for 2018, but we didn't have time to go over it and to study it. And what I would like to suggest is that we table this proposal until we've had time to discuss the budget for 2018. Once again, we were given that at FedRAC, but we didn't have time to discuss it. We have just made our first payment on the Section 108 CDBG loan. We paid $159,000 plus $11,022 in principal and interest. We've the vouchers these last 2 months had a number of items for the PAC, and I'm concerned of how the PAC will affect our budget in 2018. And we also have the refinancing of the Target property coming up. So I asked Director Marwan Salom today how long we have to accept the grant, and he said we have about 24 months after the project is accepted by the council. I'm not suggesting that we not do the project. I just like to look at the budget before we go ahead and borrow this money from ourselves.
So is that a motion to table?
Yes, that's a motion to table.
Ryan, does that need a second? Okay, is there a second for a motion to table this proposal? Hearing none, the motion fails. Is there...
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Moore.
Just a question. When it comes to energy saving, in my mind, it's a fact that we will definitely get energy saving when you invest on this type of project. Is that correct?
Yes, and as far as the city-owned streetlights are concerned, through the energy savings proposal, the contractor had to, again, guarantee the maximum construction costs. They also had to guarantee the minimum energy savings. If we don't achieve the minimum energy savings, it comes out of their pocket. So they're pretty confident, and based on my past personal experience with the city of Lakewood, as well as others that I've talked to that have implemented this, is that the energy savings and the operation and maintenance savings is real.
Okay, that should make some clarifications then.
Council, any other questions or motions? All right, Councilmember Duclos.
Thank you, Mayor. I move approval of the interagency agreement to complete the design and construction for city-owned LED streetlight conversion in the amount not to exceed $2,301,541, and to authorize staff to utilize an interfund loan of up to $2,500,000 for all the phases of the LED streetlight conversion project.
Second.
There has been a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Deputy Mayor Burbidge?
Aye.
Councilmember Safadosin?
Aye.
Councilmember Selsky?
Aye.
Councilmember Honda?
Nay.
Councilmember Kopeng?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Duclos?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-1.
All right. That concludes that amount of business. Desiree, thank you. Great job. I really appreciate your work. Marwan, great work in your department. I appreciate it.
Like I said, I'm an energy engineer. Congratulations on a good motion. You didn't include any benefits you're going to get by reducing electricity and reducing fossil fuel use and reducing greenhouse gases. So, compliments to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. All right, council reports. Councilmember Safadosin.
Thank you, Mayor. Deputy Mayor and I went to the Homestretch documentary that followed 3 homeless youth, and it was an incredible documentary to where it gives hope when there are opportunities given. And so I'm very appreciative. It's the library that put it on, and they have other programs that they are featuring. So if you have time, just go on their website and see what's out there, because they have other documentaries, other stories, and other things, especially that are relevant to what's going on currently. And then last Sunday, we did the We Love Our City event, where we're around 300 volunteers, I believe. We're out there, and I'll have you, Mark, say more about it. And then at the last council meeting, there were people who talked about rent increase here in our city and the big petitions. And I'm actually experiencing that. Since June, my rent has gone up twice, and for a total of $162 right now. So it starts now, my rent, and that's when I really realized the impact. And so I don't know how this can continue, and we expect people to really not lose their housing. And so I think it's serious, and it's something that, and I don't know what the solution is. I don't know what we can do about it, but I believe it's a conversation we should have, and we can't just drop that. So I would put that forth and see what the council mayor would like to do, have a conversation, educate ourselves. I don't know, but something needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. Before the meeting, I had a conversation with Jeff Watson about a follow-up to that young man's concerns from the last meeting. And let's continue to have those conversations, and we'll be talking about that. You know, we're very fortunate to have Councilmember Duclos, who actually, you work in housing with King County now. We've got Councilmember Duclos, who's got a lot of experience building housing and running housing. So let's have some conversations about that, because
it's a serious issue.
It is. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Selsky.
Thanks, Mayor Farrell. I'll keep my comments real light. I want to follow up on the mayor's comments about the Korean Quarterly meeting for their 25th anniversary, and I think all of us were there. It was a fantastic night. I learned an immense amount about the organization, what they've done, how they've influenced the city over the past 25 years in ways we can't even measure. So it was a great evening. I just want to thank Mayor Mike Park and the Korean community for the invitation and for the event and the opportunity. What a great night. The entertainment was fantastic. The speeches, it was just a great night. And one of the things that happens during that was the directors give a presentation, and each one of them gave one. I found them to be very witty, humorous, and entertaining. So thank you, directors, for all that you did to help entertain us that night. It was great. Then the only other thing is I want to send out a reminder to save the date for the Multi-Service Center Helps Luncheon, which occurs Thursday, the 19th of October, Emerald Downs at 11:30. This is just one of the 2 large fundraisers that occur for the year for the Multi-Service Center, so I encourage everybody to go out and attend this, help donate, and let's provide some funding for the Multi-Service Center and the great work they do for our community. And that's it. Thank you. No. That's it.
Councilmember Honda.
Thank you very much. On Friday, this Friday, the Federal Way Noon Kiwanis Club is holding Oktoberfest. It's our 3rd Oktoberfest that we've held, and all of the money that we raise goes to the inclusion program, which is at the Federal Way Community Center for adults with disabilities. And this year, if we make enough money, we will also be providing some scholarships for children. Tickets are $20. You can buy tickets at the door for $25. Dinner is provided, and it should be a lot of fun. I would really encourage you to go if you have the time to go.
Councilmember?
Yes.
When is that again?
This Friday at the Federal Way Community Center. And I'd like to talk a little bit about Camp Kilworth. So my vision for Camp Kilworth, and this is just my vision, is that the city proposed to the Kilworth Foundations that we take over the property for a period of time. I'm thinking 10 years. We keep the camp open for the benefit of the public. I believe that Dr. and Mrs. Kilworth would support this proposal. I would suggest working with the local scout groups to maintain the camp. I have been meeting with the local scouts and the Friends of Camp Kilworth now since before the camp was closed. Camp Kilworth is a beautiful piece of property, and once it's gone, we'll never be able to replace it. I want to think about the future of our children and the future of the city, and I think this is a huge benefit to the city if we have Camp Kilworth as it is. I'm not suggesting that we would want to make any improvements to the camp, but the Rotary Lodge is historic. I think we could probably find some funding to restore that. I think it's certainly worth looking into and worth saving, and it's for the future of our children and grandchildren. And I would also like to see, get more information on the LNG plant, and I think a study session would be beneficial for the residents of Federal Way. This could potentially affect Federal Way. We're not an island. Tacoma is our next city right over, and the tide flats are right at the bottom of the hill. So if that's the choice of the council, I think it would be beneficial to hear what's going on down there. Thank you.
All right. Councilmember Kope.
I'm going to keep my comments brief tonight. I've got a cough that keeps popping up. But with We Love Our City, just wanted to congratulate Shelley Pauls and the team that worked so hard to bring community of volunteers together. It was between 300 and 400 people, did all kinds of acts of service throughout the city. So it was pretty amazing turnout, and I think it's just a very good example of the community working together to create solutions. So really happy to be a part of that. And then Advancing Leadership, another great organization I'm on the board of, and certainly enjoy serving alongside of the other board members there. We're having a Evening with the Stars event this Saturday, the 7th, at the community center, and come and make sure you bid on the tiramisu and the red velvet cakes I'll be bringing for dessert. So the dessert dash, the famous dessert dash. I also want to remind everybody the Parks and Recreation, Human Services, and Public Safety Committee meeting is this Tuesday, the 10th, at 5 o'clock in the High Levels room. So thank you.
Sign me up for the tiramisu. Okay. All right. Mark.
I'm going to have to fight you for that, Mr. Mayor. That's my favorite dessert, tiramisu. Lots of important things happened tonight, but of course they happen every single council meeting. But before I go any further, I want to acknowledge my friend in the back who has come with me to the legislature and who's a friend of mine who partners up with the ARC of King County. So thank you for being here. I have to say that I am incredibly grateful for the Warehouser Coalition of folks that are here. I appreciate their tenacity. I appreciate how they've approached this whole issue, and you know, as much as it's frustrating for me to not give my opinion, due to the fact that I don't want to do anything to harm the city in legal matters, I have to certainly say that I have my concerns, and so I continue to listen intently. But there are certainly concerns that come in my mind. I also want to thank the Boy Scout members for being here. Saving Camp Kilworth, it was stated to me recently that it's such an important issue. And I want to reiterate that it is certainly not political. It is certainly not, I don't advocate for that because it's the right flavor of the month. But Camp Kilworth is a piece of treasure that we have right here in Federal Way. It's historical. If you look at the footage, it is phenomenal. I've watched it dozens of times. And it is absolutely amazing. And environmentally, it is so important that we protect that piece of land. We don't have lands like that anymore. And I feel like it's a duty of mine to protect that piece of land. And so I applaud many of our council members that have advocated, that have talked about, and that have recognized this issue. I applaud our Boy Scout members for taking leadership and taking into their own hand of what it means to really advocate as they're doing it. And I applaud many of the parents and the community members and the neighbors that have come before the council to share their opinions and thoughts and their passion for protecting something that is so rare nowadays in the world of big development that's happening. And so I think there are many, many points to be made, but I will echo what Councilor Susan Honda has stated, and that's we need to find an option. Turning our backs on this land, as a council member, I'm going to say, and I'm only speaking for myself, is a zero tolerance for me. I will not do that, and I will fight back. And we've got to do everything we can. And I think the mayor's right. It's a challenging issue. We're going to have to, we've solved our challenges in the past. I'm confident that we can do it again. And so it's going to be challenging. I get that. But for our youth, for our families, for the generations in the past to generations in the future, we've got to do everything to ensure that this valuable land, this historical land, doesn't get in the hands of developers. I think that is the wrong thing, and if that happens, then I will be ashamed of being a council member because I feel like I've not done my job. And so it's going to be a challenge that we're all going to have to work together. And so I appreciate this opportunity to share this with you. And let's all work together. I think that's really important. It doesn't matter who's going to get the recognition. That doesn't matter. What matters is that we're all working together, hand in hand, and trying to solve this problem. Thank you.
Councilor Duclos.
Well, I'll follow up on that because I do support Camp Kilworth also. I would like to see this beautiful piece of property preserved, not just for the Boy Scouts. There's another group out there called Girl Scouts. And then just the other citizens of the city here that might like to go up there and walk the property, have a picnic up there, maybe camp out there. I think, we really need to preserve as much land, undeveloped land, as we can. As we become a growing city and we start building up higher and higher and getting more dense, we still need green space. We have the beautiful Town Square Park, which is used quite a bit, and I verify that because I'm there every week doing my mile walk. And I think it's nice if we could have other parks in different parts of the city. So I really hope that we can do something with Camp Kilworth. Moving on, I would like to talk just about the Weyerhaeuser issue. I think we're doing the job to make sure that IRG has to follow all of the rules and everything in that concomitant agreement. Unfortunately, it was an agreement that was made years ago. I don't think anybody ever anticipated that the Weyerhaeuser property would be put up for sale like this. Unfortunately, generations and generations have gone, and they don't have the same love for it and for the city of Federal Way as the founders did. Matter of fact, they've moved up to Seattle. They don't even want to be a part of Federal Way anymore. So we have to face the fact that times change, and I hope that we can do the most we can to try and save it, maybe even raise some money and buy some more of the property. I know we've already bought the North Lake area. We've saved that through the conservation funds. But I really hope we don't lose it all. And finally, my favorite agency, Sound Transit. Last Sunday's paper, Sunday, April 4th, the Seattle Times did a wonderful article in here with a detailed lab about Sound Transit, who's on the board, and what their affiliations are with, and where all the money comes from, and how much money that we have put into this agency, and how poorly it is managed. So if you can get a chance, if you can, go online and look up the Sunday, September 24th, 2017 issue of the Seattle Times. and get, it's a fantastic article. I don't want to take up any more time. I was going to quote some things, but I won't do that now. And that's the end of my report.
All right, thank you. Deputy Mayor Burbidge.
Thank you. The next meeting of the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee is a week from tomorrow, so that's Wednesday, October 11th at 10 in the morning. And I wanted to mention, too, Councilmember Zephyr Dawson mentioned the documentary that we both attended at the library, and it was very moving, very interesting, citing the challenges faced by our youth who sometimes are homeless. But I found especially valuable that the library staff had also invited a representative from the Multi-Service Center and also from the schools. These are people who specifically deal with these challenges, and they were very informative regarding the resources that they're able to provide to help out with these challenges. I enjoyed my time volunteering with the We Love Our City event on Sunday. I had the privilege of picking up litter in a couple different locations, and it was very good exercise. I could feel it the next day. And I also was impressed with that we had several representatives from our city council participating as well. And while I was picking up litter, Representative Mike Pelliciotti happened along and saw me picking up litter, and he came over and helped out for the rest of the time that I was out there. It was very, very nice to have that additional help. Tomorrow morning I'll be attending a meeting of the Puget Sound Gateway Committee that will be working on planning for implementation of State Routes 167 and 509 projects, which also will affect our city, of course. They're on the doorsteps of our city. And also this weekend, our Federal Way Symphony has 2 concerts at our new Performing Arts and Events Center, Saturday evening at 7:30 p.m. and Sunday afternoon at 2. And joining the symphony will be our Federal Way Chorale, the Symphony Singers, and also the Boeing Employee Choir. And if you've ever heard a symphony joined with a major chorale, wonderful singers, you know how glorious it can be. And they'll be doing Beethoven's 9th Symphony. It should be just splendid. They also have another soloist doing they're doing Shostakovich and Tchaikovsky. Okay, the Piano Concert No. 1, Tchaikovsky, has soloist Anastasia Dedic. And so this should be a fantastic program. I've watched and listened to our local Federal Way Symphony really step up to the plate, knowing that the PAC is opening. They have gone above and beyond to become a high-quality symphony. So hope you can take that in.
Great. And with that, we are adjourned. Great meeting, everybody.